All right, I'm Joshua Kemble. This is Joshua Kemble's live stream, episode 292. We're in the middle of the day, the beginning of the day, and I am working on flat coloring a comic book page 77, for my graphic novel. Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, a Victorian romance and suspense novel that talks about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning's foray into the world of Victorian seances. I'm going to be doing potentially a spicy stream today. We'll see how many people show up. I usually am not streaming this early, but luckily I'm able to kind of stream a little bit earlier in the day. Who am I? I've been a graphic designer and illustrator professionally for over 20 years. I was an art director for about 9 years, and I am currently going back to freelance and the freelance lifestyle, which is going to be kind of interesting to see. I have a couple things on the dock to do, so I'm going to keep the music going for a little bit just while I talk about that. So what's on the dock for today? What we're thinking about doing today is, number one, we're going to color page 77. We're going to finish our flat colors. That's what I plan on doing during this stream. We might get a little spicy on this stream because we did a spicy stream last stream where we did a commentary. We're giving Tim Pool another chance. Another shot at redemption. So far, the dude has not impressed me at all. But there's an episode of The Culture War called episode 20 where he's debating masculinity with Destiny, John Doyle, and Lauren Chen. So far, this guy, John Doyle, on the last one, was making the claim that there is estrogen in water. Making some pretty wild claims that people should be able to fight each other on a playground over Legos. Some pretty wild claims. Destiny has been holding up pretty well on it. It's been an interesting video to comment on. I plan on doing a little bit of that, but as usual, this is an art stream, not a political stream. So that's something we're just kind of having on in the background while we work on getting these graphic novel pages done, which is an incredibly long and hard process. I don't know why the music's kind of slowing down. Here we go. I think it's back. Okay, let's turn off the music. I heard tell from Jim Lujan that he might be recording a new bit for the intro of my streams. That's "Let's get ready to crumble," or crumble, not crumble. I'm actually pretty excited about that. I'm gonna read a little chat that Jim sent me. He was asking how the big aquarium has the big aquarium attacked me yet? Has big aquarium, because he was joking that we should cover aquarium controversies because I just got an aquarium and big aquarium is out to get you guys. And so Jim just sent a message saying, we're all just a little fish swimming in a sea of greed. And I said, you have to say that in a Herzog voice, a Werner Herzog voice. And his response was, I'm going to try my best Herzog voice, ladies and gentlemen. The fish swim in circles endlessly, searching for the open sea that is never to be found, only suffering and daily morsels to exasperate their meaningless existence. That's a Jim Lujan bit, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So what we're doing on this stream is mainly art. And again, you're going to hear in the background a little bit of big aquarium as the bubbles slowly rise in the existential dread of our lives. My wife's going to be working on kids books in the background, so if you happen to notice that, she is a freelance illustrator as well. And the plan for today is to go over this spicy stream, a spice stream, a very spicy stream. Not a Spice Girls stream, although I've made that joke before. My wife said like a Spice Girls one. I was joking about that. I built the suspense for a spicy stream on the last live stream, and then I built it up for like a good 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then I revealed that it was really just a build up to sing "If You Want to Be My Lover" by the Spice Girls. I can't remember what that song is actually called. We are having a pretty good day here. This morning, I actually exercised. I feel really good about this. I had a routine of exercise for about 3 years straight that I stayed to on like a clockwork schedule. And, my day job, like, basically sucked away all of that time on top of the comics. And so now suddenly I have time to work out, which is actually really nice. I got a workout in this morning, and it was brutal, as all workouts are when you haven't done it in a long time. And it's not like a hardcore like jock workout or anything. It's just like a shrimpy guy like me workout. So it's like a mile on a rowing machine, and then like some basic lifts. And that was brutally hard to get through, because it's been about a year since I had hit the proverbial gym. Um, not an intense workout, but it was nice, and I feel energized, even though it was brutal during. The thing that I love about exercising is after the fact, you end up with like a burst of energy. And I think for those of us who are creatives doing like graphic design, illustration, such things, exercise is like fundamental. It's really important. Um, okay, let's see. There's a few more things I want to get to before we get into the fun art stuff. So we're gonna go to our art screen in a second. So the plan on the doc today is I'm gonna finish this page, then I'm gonna update my resume, which might take quite a few hours. I haven't had to update my resume in like a decade, so it definitely needs a refresh, I'm sure. Once that's updated, I also have to update my CV, which is for anybody who's kind of curious, that's like an extra long resume for teaching. It's particularly geared to like your teaching experience and like gallery shows, other things like that. I'm gonna need to update that probably to show like my Gallery 1988 show and some other stuff that I've done in the last like decade. And then the plan is after that, do another comic page, right? And then after that, I might do a painting on stream. So I'm kind of excited about that. So the reason I'm targeting the comic pages is it's a publishing deal that I already have. It's an obligation that I have to fulfill. And so the idea is to sneak in the comic pages amid the job hunt and all other sorts of stuff. I really honestly don't know if what I want to pursue right now is full-time work. I will kind of put the cards out there, and being a person of faith, I'm going to kind of just rest with wherever God kind of puts me. As weird as that is to say, that might sound strange to people who don't believe. But for me, like, that's a big act of faith, is like anytime you're in kind of crisis, you kind of need to just trust that, things are going to work out. That being said, strangely, I feel relieved and extremely positive about kind of the move that's happening. And I'm excited to see where things end up going professionally, because I just feel like it feels like I've been shackled, and it's kind of nice that the chains are off. I don't know if that makes sense. But I think people who've worked like a long kind of corporate gig can kind of understand that. Like, even if at the best of places, about a decade in, it's a little tough to kind of feel energy or alive. Like, you just kind of, it can kind of eat your soul. And so to me, it's nice because it's like I feel like I've had my soul returned, as well as my speech returned, which is great. So I'm no longer a representative of a company except my own when I'm speaking, and so that's kind of fun too. So that's kind of the recap of like what the plan is today. So we're gonna hang out for a couple hours probably while I finish the flats for this page. Then we're gonna take a break. I'll probably be streaming again quite frequently. So if you guys are fans of this stream or just tuning into this stream, make sure you've hit that bell. Make sure you've hit subscribe so you get notifications because I'm going to be going live quite a lot. I want to try to live stream as much as possible because I enjoy it, and it's a way to have company and keep people company. So while we're working on this weird thing called art that we all do, it's nice to have like a bullpen. And so even if it gets spicy, I think that can be pretty fun. And speaking of the devil, we have a guest hopping on, which is a Kerr of Corey. How's it going, Corey Kerr?
Good. Speaking of the devil, huh? Didn't know I've risen to such heights.
Burning with the devil, yeah. Anyhow, how's it going, Corey?
It's good, man. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Right.
I'm on my iPad.
Oh yeah, I can hear you just great.
Okay, good.
Nice.
Yeah,
are you at work?
I am grading for the next hour, so I figured I can hang out while I grade.
I love it. That's great. Okay, well, I'll hold off on the spicy commentary unless you want to join in. I will say it's funny in the sense that I don't know if you've noticed this trend online. There's like these people who are giving dating advice, and many of them are in like their 20s.
Oh.
And it's on the right and the left where it's like, well, in my experience, like women are programmed this way to go for this. And I'm like sitting here as a 40-year-old, like, you guys are stupid kids. What are you talking about? Have you ever been in a relationship?
It's kind of like people who give parenting advice. Everybody knows exactly what to do until you have your own kids.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a good example. Like, I'm trying to teach my kid how to swim, and my kid is amazing, but he's a little nervous about getting in the water and stuff like that. And it's one thing in theory to like read how to teach your kid to swim.
Yeah.
And it's a whole other thing to actually do it. It's just like a whole beast of the thing where the whole process, I'm like, am I doing this right? Like, anyhow. We got Philip Chandler saying, hey, Kemble and Kerr together again. Yeah, we're like good buddies. It's been a while. Speaking of Corey, I was going to text you guys, but you could just say on air, I guess. Whose turn is it to get a guest? Is it mine this week? Or I can't remember.
It's yours.
Okay.
Because I think I go after you, right?
I can't remember.
Let me look. I looked it up the other day because
I know exciting content for everybody out there. We're gonna find out who has to find a guest for Artcasters next week.
Let's go Artcasters and filter by upload date.
You know what's bizarre? By the way, I'm gonna just go to my like drawing cam while you're looking that up.
So Scott, we interviewed Scott, and then I had Emmeline on.
Oh, okay. So it is my turn.
Yeah.
Have we had Philip on yet? Philip Chandler?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I feel like we should have Philip on. Philip, you're in chat. You want to be on Artcasters on Thursday? I'm like outsourcing it. I'm very proactive, you guys. I'm a very proactive person.
Yeah. I'd still be down to do where we interview each other as well.
Oh, we still need to do if Philip can't, because Philip's in chat right now. At least he was. And by the way, Scott, you got to hop in if you got time. If Philip can't, then I suggest that we do it as the Corey Kerr highlight, because I think it would be fun to talk a little more in detail about the esoteric, not esoteric.
Flux.
Crumble Flux, yes.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Corey, I think you'd get a kick out of this. There's a potential that in spring I might end up teaching an art theory class.
Oh, cool.
Which is funny because my friend who suggested it's still up in the air, but he was like, "Oh, you'd be perfect for that." Ironically, I was like, I used to hate theory, and weirdly enough, I'm like really into theory now. So yeah, actually, that would be perfect. And I've noticed this about a lot of people. People who get really pissed off about theory are going to probably end up being into theory. People who are just kind of like meh about it probably aren't going to be into it, you know?
Yeah. What roughly is considered theory? Like, what do you cover? Because I come from really non-traditional art background.
I think a lot of it's like just different theories in art, and then it I think would have like some professional practices stuff. So it would go over like it would probably start. I'm guessing again, like he'd probably be showing me more of the curriculum, but it'd probably start with like Greenberg and like the modernists after formalism.
Oh.
And so it'd probably go over formalism, modernism, I'm guessing it would probably get into like feminism, and then like probably like postmodernism, and then kind of where we are, which is like postmodernism, which is this. That's why you never call a movement after. Like if you call a movement
Right.
like if I call it like if we were to make a show called Post Artcasters, you're kind of screwed because if you make a show after that, what do you call it? Like post?
Post.
Yeah. I think we should do a show
post
called
post squared Artcasters.
Yeah, the postal Artcasters. But yeah, anyhow, so that's an interesting thing. Philip said, I work until 12:30 my time, 9:30 your time. I don't think I can be there for the start of the show. Okay, so Philip's out. So what do you think, Corey? Would you be okay with doing like a Corey highlight one? Okay,
yeah,
awesome. That saves me a little bit of work, so I appreciate that. Yeah. So how's your day going, man? Like how are you enjoying your semester?
My semester is not enjoyable, and I cannot wait for it to be over. We are about a week and a half from being done, so very excited to not have to deal with what I'm dealing with right now anymore.
Nice. Yeah, I can understand that.
I'm excited for you to teach again. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna start adding my name to the adjunct pool and stuff. The only thing that's unfortunate is the timing, because it's like the idea of getting in for like a fall class at this point is not gonna happen. But it's also kind of relaxing in the sense of, it buys me time to kind of, hunt for places that might be looking in spring. And maybe fill up the adjuncting schedule. Again, adjuncting has terrible pay, but at this point, I'm really questioning corporate stuff. Like I can't explain the relief I felt leaving that place. And it's not that it was a bad place. It's just like there is something about corporations that just sucks the soul out of human beings,
Yeah, I mean, everywhere you go, it's kind of a bit of a trade-off of, sacrificing your needs and desires for the needs and desires of the collective, whether that collective is a group or a corporation or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't mind some sacrifices, but I feel like there's some with, I guess my point is like, as I'm hunting, I'm going to be a little pickier with where I pick for company culture type stuff.
Yeah.
Cause it's just not worth it's anyhow, I don't want to say too much about it, but yeah, let's just say I'm happier being out of that scenario. So
yeah.
So as I'm kind of getting into this stuff, it'll be kind of interesting to see what the path is,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, new beginnings is always pretty interesting.
So anyhow, like the thing that's interesting to me about, I don't know, it's funny to me to hear relationship advice again from 20-something year olds who are kind of like politicizing relationships. And it's like, it's just kind of bizarre where it's like, also kind of things that are presented as profound, where it's like, it might be good if you occasionally like take care of your body. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's not a new concept there. Like, that's just kind of, yeah, that's kind of worn out advice. Yeah, I mean, I think most people, I think most doctors would be like, working out's not a bad thing.
I saw I saw this great. I see these little snips of comedians. Anyway, I can't remember who it was, but they're like, yeah, I think body type positivity is great, but it might be taken a little bit too far because now doctors are like, if you could be 10% less brave, like,
That's a great way of putting it. That's so funny. If you could be, like, if you could girl boss like 10% less than you're currently girl bossing.
well, because like
Yeah.
I I actually feel like having a six pack, you're probably not healthy. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain amount of like body fat percentage that is useful for like a hormonal balance.
Uh huh.
Um, and then at the same time, you know, I think the media has contributed to really bad and unrealistic and unhealthy imagery that leads to, like disordered thinking about food. And then
Yeah.
on the flip side of that, uh, being gigantic is not good for you.
Yeah. And again,
So
like, there are cases like, and again, like, here's the beauty. I can get spicy, so I can talk about this type of stuff.
yeah,
But it's like, to me, one of the interesting things is just the way that, um, like health kind of takes a second base to like comfort. Like, that to me is real. That can be a problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's funny. I don't know. People giving advice on things that are super obvious because that's the thing to do on social media.
Yeah. 100%.
Let me. I'll be back in just like 2 minutes. I'll just
Totally
step
cool.
real quick.
Yeah. I'll let you go. All right. So that was Corey Curry, ladies and gentlemen, having an interesting conversation. How is everybody doing? I hope all is well in chat. I hope that that everybody's having a productive day so far. I'm so far like basically working on flat colors. So like right now what we're doing is flatting the we're working on the flat colors for Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I think Thomas Adams said a six pack means you are very dehydrated. That's actually kind of true. I think that there are certain, ways you can kind of like sculpt your stomach or whatever. Again, I'm no expert on this type of stuff. But I have heard that in these like superhero movies, where these guys get all ripped, quite often they'll kind of go on like a diet where they're like starving themselves so that their skin like is thinner and it kind of shows muscle better. And so, from what I've heard, it's like a lot of those movies are filmed with like guys that are just like 90% dehydrated just to have that image, and that look. Um, but to be fair, I do know a few people who have like full out six packs, and are not, dehydrated. So, I don't want to like, cast off the idea of that. But Corey made a interesting point there where it's like you have, you know, media both encouraging people to eat like horrible food and then also kind of encouraging people to like accept their their unhealthy condition from eating horrible food. And it's like I think that there is like a question that somebody could bring up of like, is this all a corporate plan to just kind of destigmatize, fast food consumption? That's an interesting kind of route to go. But right now, what we're doing is, so we have Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She's having this conversation with Robert on stream, and like in their room, not on stream. We're on stream, and I have to do all the flat colors for her. And just so you guys know, if you're just tuning in, on top of that, we have so you see that, like, that's all like the shading on top of that. Holly Brown said, my sister is a bodybuilder and less than 10% body fat is objectively not healthy long term. For sure, like there are levels of exercise that are like super healthy, and I think it's a good case for all things in moderation. So I tend to think sometimes people overdo kind of scenarios and stuff like that. And they'll overdo something like, anything really. You could take something healthy, you could take something unhealthy, and if you do it too often, it all becomes unhealthy. It's kind of a weird thing, which to me makes me wonder about comic books. I feel like the making of comic books may not be super healthy because the amount of work in indie comics, it's almost impossible to do in moderation. It's just it's too much work. So I feel like animators aren't necessarily able to follow the all things. Animators and cartoonists aren't necessarily able to follow the rule of all things in moderation. Thomas said they work like 6 months for 10 minutes of film time. Yeah, Holly said LOL comics addiction. Yeah. But it is interesting, and you do kind of wonder sometimes. Like, to me, I always get a little suspicious when businesses, kind of like stand up for something, even that I agree with. Because at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, sure, there's people who work at businesses and stuff like that, and not all businesses are like evil. But in general, like a business is not going to do something unless there's like a profit motive behind it, especially a big company. Like, you know, they're kind of going to be worried about optimizing and getting a return on investment. I think that's how most businesses kind of drive. And so whenever a business like takes like a moral stance on something, this might be me being just like weird and superstitious, but I'll always like ask myself, like, what is the profit motive behind this? Like, what would be the profit motive of taking said stance or whatever? So yeah, I think that's something I tend to consider. There is Elizabeth's hair is literally the same color as Robert's suit. One thing that I've kept consistent in this comic is I have, let's see here. I have Robert's suit as like one tone of brown, and then I have Elizabeth's hair as the same tone of brown. But the thing that's consistent here is Elizabeth has a lot of costume changes throughout the story, because the story really is like a highlight of Elizabeth, as well as like I did a little bit of research on the Victorian era, and in the Victorian era, men usually did not change outfits as often as women. And so like a good suit would be kind of reused quite a lot. whereas like women tended to change their clothes more often, like change their outfits. They'd have far more dresses. And this doesn't mean men wouldn't have a variety of clothing, but that combined with the fact that I really wanted Elizabeth to be a little more high lit than Robert, I have Elizabeth doing a lot more costume changes throughout the story. I hope that kind of makes sense. So you'll see Robert in this brown suit like quite a lot of the story, and occasionally he'll change costume. Like I have him change costume for when he's at the theater. But in this case, because they just had guests over, he was wearing his brown suit then. Um, then it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for him to have a costume change. Speaking of the devil, I should probably double check. Yes, okay, I did have him in his brown suit, so that's good. And we have Elizabeth's hair all deselected. Holly said fast food equals obesity equals weight loss industry funding equals big pharma win and fast food industry. See what I mean? Like that actually isn't that wild of a conspiracy to me. Um, Being chemically addicted to hyper palatable food to me seems like villain behavior, but it's not popular to point that out because people will get defensive. Yeah, and I'm kind of weird about food. Like again, I don't have like the healthiest diet myself. I definitely indulge in fast food probably way more than I should. Um so I'm not above the fray in that sense. Back when like Monsanto was a corporation, I can't remember who bought out Monsanto. I guess somebody could look that up for me. I tried to do like a no Monsanto thing. Oh, hold on, I just got a message. Let me see what's going on. Oh, cool. Corey's ready to come back in. How's it going?
Great.
Well, I was worried you got in trouble or something. Like,
Oh no,
does that get you in trouble at your work?
no. It was
Okay,
a colleague of mine. We go out to lunch way too much, ironically. And he dropped
nice.
by and was like, "Hey, let's get something to eat." I'm like, "Oh, I'm grading and hanging out." He's like, "All right." So yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, so like we were just kind of talking, like Holly just said a really funny connection. Like again, I'm always a little suspicious of like wild conspiracy theories because usually they just require too many collaborators to actually work. Like
Right.
meaning, like the whole vaccine one always weirds me out because it's like that just means the entire like every government across the world would have to have like agreed, even though we're talking about like for some reason Palestine and Israel they can't agree on anything, but they both agreed to do this hoax of a vaccine. It's just it's beyond believable. But Holly pointed out one that I kind of could buy, which is like fast food equals obesity equals weight loss industry funding equals big pharma win and fast food industry. I
So
can kind of
how
see
I
a
think
connection there.
that works. It's a weird conspiracy theory if you think that all of those industries and groups of people
Are
had like a
collaborating.
meeting in the woods and
Yeah.
collaborated to create this.
Yeah.
But I think it's extremely likely that each one of them is profiting off of self-interest at the cost of their customers and society, and it
Yeah.
happens to work as a really symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I think it's more of like a it's just the nature of capitalism like at its worst. Like capitalism has some really great things about it, but you know, like I was saying, I'm always suspicious when a company, takes a moral stance on something because they're not, again, companies aren't necessarily immoral. They're run by people, and people are motivated by morals. I definitely have seen times where even a big business makes a call based on morality rather than profit. That's
Yeah.
not like outside of the bounds of um people. But in general, especially when you're talking about people who literally have an incentive, like their job is to make sure that they're getting a return on investment,
Yeah.
and they're maximizing profits. There's actually, like, especially like publicly traded companies, right? That's like, I think that's actually the law. Like, if you're a CEO of like a publicly traded company, I think you have to be literally making decisions to maximize profit.
It's that is an interpretation of the law that came out during Reaganomics,
Yeah, yeah,
and there are other ways to interpret that.
yeah.
That
But fiduciary responsibility, is a thing, right?
it is, but fiduciary responsibility, it used to mean a more holistic approach of fiduciary responsibility to your stakeholders, to your employees, to your customers, and to greater society.
And
And
then
then
it
there
just
was that
switched to
dude,
stakeholders under Reagan.
it switched to 100% stakeholders at the cost of everything else. And I don't
Yeah,
think the law, the founders of the country,
yeah,
anybody ever really specifically intended for things like Twitter to happen, where it's like, and this is a common thing where it's like, well, I got to do what's right for my stakeholders. It's like,
yeah,
but do you have to like allow a company to be purchased, load it with billions of dollars of debt to the
yeah,
detriment of the company, the customers, and greater society for temporary wins and the stakeholders? I don't think
yeah.
that's exactly what was intended. So I think we lost the balance in the 80s.
No, I actually would agree with you. I don't think that's what it necessarily is, but because of that kind of
Yes.
misperception, I
Yeah.
think there is, to me, because that exists. And I mean, anybody who isn't familiar with like fiduciary responsibility, you should look it up. There is that thing that exists, and the more current interpretation of that. And because of that, like, if a company comes out and is like, we're taking this moral stance, I usually always think, well, where's the money for them there? Because, like,
Right.
rarely is, especially a giant corporation, because when you get smaller companies, right, it can be more driven by like personalities. Whereas when you get a giant mega corporation, it's like, it's just going to act as a collective rather than as an individual. That's just kind of the nature of like a giant group of people. And so, if they're basically driven by a profit motive, I don't tend to think that like businesses, as much as I like even agree with some of the state, I'm kind of a guy who's a bit woke. I'd call myself that, before it was kind of an insult. Um, but at the same time, like when a company gets super woke, I don't think they're doing it because they're like, oh, we're really woke. I think it's because it's proven profitable for them, most of the time, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, anytime a company, even if I agree with what they're saying, I usually view it with a little bit of skepticism of like, yeah, well, there's money involved in this. And the second the money disappears, they'll probably take a different stance. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, anyhow, the reason I was bringing that up is when I see things about like body positivity and stuff, it's
Oh no. I don't know if I lost you or
like, I don't know more. That's what I think. I don't know if that makes sense.
you,
That's
you
a
cut out
wild take, I
a
know.
little there at the
It's
end, but
wildly.
what you were saying before you cut out sounded great.
Okay, I was saying that I think companies, like, in the sense of like body positivity and stuff like that, I think companies are usually doing that to sell more clothes, or more food, or whatever.
Right.
Like, I don't tend to think they're like, oh, look, they're being really accepting. It's like, no, I think they see a need in a market where they're like, okay, there's people who are kind of like overweight, and we need to sell clothes, and we can make bigger clothes, and we'll sell more clothes. So let's promote body positivity, which isn't bad, by the way. I have friends who literally have the genetic issue of obesity, and that's a tough one, where it's like they'll literally diet and exercise like every single day, and like burn just an insane amount of calories, and they're just still overweight. Like,
Yeah.
um they'll do diets, they'll do like keto diets, all of it, and it's just like, they're just designed in a weird way, it's just like a genetic thing where they're just not going to lose weight, you know? So that
There's
exists.
there's also there's also a bit of a class system involvement as well,
Yeah.
because everybody's always like, oh, eat healthy and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but also that can be really expensive. I mean, like
Yeah.
vegetables are pretty cheap if you live in certain parts of the country where they're growing them.
Yeah.
But also, like, there's a time component. Like if I'm working so much that I don't have time to spend 90 minutes preparing a meal,
Yep.
because I'm a single mom and I've got to take care of my kids and I'm working a job and a half or something.
Mm-hmm. Or I'm a cartoonist.
Yeah, right. You've got, there's trade-offs in everything that you do, and so the luxury of having, good and healthy things is thing. And then I think there's also like a mental health component. Like when other people cook like good healthy meals for me,
Yeah.
they taste fine. I like them or whatever, but like sometimes I'm sad and I need to eat garbage in my
Yes.
mind. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
like
I definitely
it's
have
just,
that. Like where there's times where I'm like, I'm super bummed and I don't even like get I think I don't sad eat as much as other people, but yeah, there's definitely been times where I'm like, I had a really bad day. I'm gonna go get like a Tommy burger just slathered in like fake like, oh, maybe I froze. Am I
I,
freezing?
you're freezing for me, but I don't know if it's probably my connection. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, anyone in the chats, because I am seeing like a weird lag, like it just went black on the screen. So anybody in the chat, if you guys are seeing me freeze, let me know.
Yeah, let me know if it's me as well, because I can jump off. I don't normally log in from work.
No, it's fun, man.
Oh yeah, no, I just don't know what the connection here is like. They have a weird kind of like internal network that's super fast, but stuff that goes outside is, I don't know, throttled or something. So
No, I understand that. I think that's those weird kind of server based things at workplaces too, where it's like it'll be really fast, but it also is like dependent because if it's getting like flooded, it'll kind of like like throttle it to kind of balance out.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, there are also times where I think I've noticed recently, as I've aged, like my palate has matured, I guess, but I
Yeah,
still have the old like college starving mentality where it's like I need to eat a lot of cheap calories because I don't know when my next meal is going to be there. Like I haven't
yeah,
been poor enough to not know when I was going to eat next for like decades, but like I still have that my mentality of like,
yeah,
okay, I can eat an entire pizza for $5. I should probably
yeah.
do that, like, because
No,
I
I
I got to
totally
pack it
have that.
away.
Yeah, where I'll like be like, okay, if I do this like deal through like Pizza Hut where I order like an entire pizza for like $6.99 and I order two, then I've got like a couple meals there where I could literally just gouge on these pizzas. Yeah, I definitely have that leftover from college and kind of being on the lamb.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody had the same college experience as we did, but like I literally didn't know. Like I remember one time I had to survive on like $6 for 5.5 weeks
Yep,
for like
that
food.
sounds
Like,
familiar.
yeah,
I
and it's
remember
it's doable. It's just
my
not
best
pleasant.
friend was like those giant boxes of ramen packs.
Oh, I
Like
couldn't, man.
that was like the best thing.
I ate two full cases of ramen when I first got to
Yeah.
college, and it made me so sick after that I like had like Anderson's taste aversion, and so I couldn't do it anymore. But I'll tell you what, you can eat for $1.11 a day if you have four pancakes with
Mm.
peanut butter and syrup and a glass of milk for 3 meals a day.
Mm.
So you just get one of those big. I mean, this is, you know early 2000. late 90s. But
Yeah.
you get one of those big 10-pound bags of pancake batter.
That's a good
Yeah.
point, actually, because pancakes are really like absurdly filling. Like, I don't think that's going to be great for your health, but if we're
No.
just talking about like pure survival, you know, that is not a bad route. The
Yeah.
only problem is
Also,
like pancakes without like syrup. That's a tough road.
yeah. One time
Did you get
I
like the cheap syrup, or did you just like
oh yeah,
do
that's
just raw pancakes?
no. You get to do syrup and crunchy peanut butter because
Nice.
then you get kind of the sugar, the initial sugar boost,
Hmm.
the carbs, which they're filling, and then you get the protein from the peanut butter.
I like
Really,
it.
what you're getting is sugar on top of sugar on top of sugar, but it's
Hmm.
like super cheap. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I kind of get that. I used to do those. Well, we talked about this because I think we both used to do that. There was this like McDonald's cheeseburger deal where you could get like this just pile of cheeseburgers for like
29
I
cent
think
cheeseburgers, man.
yeah. And so I used to get like I think we both did this, but I used to get like a slew of those, and then I just leave them in my refrigerator and like microwave them every meal.
Yeah, you could make your own Big Mac if you
Oh yeah,
if
you just
you,
double them up.
you take the bun off of one of them,
Hmm.
and then the bottom bun of the other one becomes the middle bun when you stack them
Hmm.
together. And there's just like a little bit more sauce and like
Hmm.
some diced onions, and then you got a 60-cent Big Mac.
Holly said college for me was bananas. Bananas are really good for like filling your stomach at least temporarily. Meat. She said because the Mexican meat market sold a bundle for $1, and they
Oh,
had
that's awesome.
coupons. She said, "I don't know if I got scurvy, but that's not a good way to eat." Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to like think about, just like those old days of of conserving food to be the most palatable um and yet cheap. Like whatever's cheap and palatable and will fill you for a while. My other favorite thing was the these did not work to fill you up, but they were just insanely addictive. Was like the Taco Bell tacos, where you get like two for $1.
Yeah.
Those would fill you up for about 20 minutes, and then
Yeah,
all the grease would come out.
I could never justify that because it was like I need something sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. You never
One
really,
time,
that one didn't give you good ROI, where I was talking about
right.
return
Yeah.
on investment. You weren't getting a lot from that. You get about 10 minutes of full, and then give me 2 seconds. Corey, do you want me to leave you on so that you can kind of let people know where they can find you and all that stuff? Or do you want me to go to a commercial,
Yeah,
whichever you
run
prefer?
a promo. People know where I am.
Okay. If you haven't yet, though, check out Corey Kerr's art and pick up a mug for yourself with the esoteric crumble flux illustrations that he's been doing. They're very cool. Here is we're gonna play the Wordzoid trailer. I'm really excited. I don't know if you saw what Jim was talking about, but he's gonna make an audio segment that says "Let's get ready to crumble"
That's awesome.
with the crowd and everything. So I'm very excited to see that. Okay, here we go.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm gonna have to go with Karen Carpenter.
Oh my goodness, there are.
Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
Okay, so Corey, I want your opinion on this. The thing I was watching yesterday, it talked like one of the guys was making a claim that there's estrogen in the drinking water. Is there any truth to that? I'm like that just sounds like a wacky. I almost expected them to start talking about like gay frogs or something after that, you know?
Where is the
But
estrogen going to come from? You have to get it from somewhere.
I have no idea. Like I think like I'm guessing there's probably like a conspiracy that they're like pumping it into the groundwater, you know? There's some company out there just like twirling their mustache. It's a company of what they view as like feminists. You know, they're like ha 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 ha, ha and like pouring estrogen into the like drinking water. Just like we will feminize the world.
I mean, depending on how much estrogen they're putting in, that would have drastically different effects than what we're seeing in
Yeah,
society.
yeah, I don't understand it, but so that was one claim the guy made, like within his intro statement. His other statement, which was hilarious, was his example for us feminizing men and getting away from masculinity was oh my gosh, what was it? He said oh my gosh, this one's hilarious and I was curious your take. Oh, he said we need to go back to the day where people could defend themselves against bullies who broke their Legos. This actually occurred in a like
So
supposed debate on like a big show. I kind
is
of couldn't
he
believe it.
is he calling for like pistols at dawn or like what?
Yeah, I
Like
was
what?
joking. Like it sounds like he has this vision that like there was an era in time in America where like all the kids in school were given like a cornucopia filled with weapons and had to like fight each other to the death, and like that was manhood back in the day. Now we just have these, you know, bubble wrapped schools where kids can't just fight to the death. Like
Okay, really, really obscure reference, but I think this is probably where this is coming from. I think it's Fred Savage.
yeah,
Was he in Fred Savage? The Boy Who Could Fly. Yep, it was him. Okay, have you seen The Boy Who Could Fly?
I have
Almost no
not.
one
I
has
did want
seen
to
this
highlight
movie.
Scott said that his dogs go crazy every time the correct bell rings on Wordzoid. That's hilarious.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
So
So
Fred Savage, sorry, go ahead.
no, at the end of The Boy Who Could Fly, I'm kind of curious if anyone in the chats has seen this movie because it's really not worth watching. But
There were a
there's
lot of
this like,
bad Fred Savage movies, you know,
yeah, well,
back in the
the
day.
B story, the A story is like this older sibling kind of befriends this mute. It turns out he's magic and he can fly, whatever, right? The
Uh,
B story, the A story is totally boring and not worth paying attention to. The
yeah.
B story is Fred Savage having like a total all-out 80s style war with a group of bullies, and they're like the best stereotypical 1984 bullies that you
Oh,
could
nice. So
possibly
they're all punk
imagine.
rockers, of course, I'd imagine.
Yeah, they're like, they're like they're dressed like poor kids, or whatever, and they're all thuggish and but
Yeah.
like he just I want to do a supercut of just the B story from this movie because
Yeah.
it would only be about 10 minutes long, but it's
Uh,
totally worth it. And what happens is he's just trying to ride around the block on his big wheels, but he can't because they won't let him and they beat him up every time, or whatever. And so he does like this is well before Home Alone and any of that. I think they
uh-huh.
actually probably stole a lot of this from that. He loads up and like weaponizes his big wheels with like Ziploc bags full of urine and
You guys, while Corey's describing this, I just want you guys to understand there was an era in time where you could weaponize your big wheel, and now all these
you can't.
left leaning liberals are trying to destroy our country where you can't weaponize your big wheel. Okay, so he have like oil slicks and stuff on it? Like, is it like a James Bond big wheel?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. But it was totally Home Alone. It was all like kid based traps and stuff. And
Yeah.
at the end, he like pulls out these super soakers, and they're like they're like, "Oh, are you afraid? I'm not afraid of a little water." And he's like, "It's not water. Shh, shh, it's piss."
Oh, snap. You
And then
guys
at
see,
the
that's
end,
before they pumped estrogen in our water, according to
yeah,
that guy.
right.
And
Because
now
Fred
you can no
Savage was a real
longer,
man back in the
yeah,
day.
you can't defend your pig wheel. You just got to let it go. Yeah, like the guy was making such weird claims. Like one of them, this was hilarious to me too, because I have friends who are like martial artists, like actually know like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff. And like one of his examples of like how bad our culture's gone, they're like, if you're with your girl and you just got off work, which I'm like, wait, why would you be with your girl if you just got off work? I guess you work together, but anyhow, whatever. We'll just disregard that. And he's like, and then like two or three muggers come up and want to steal your car. You have to just let them. You can't defend yourself. That's where our culture's gone. You have to just let them beat you in front of your girl. And I was like, if you talk to like any self-defense expert, no matter how good they are at fighting, if there's like 2 to 3 guys approaching you to take your car, let them take your car. Like if you can't get away safely and you're outnumbered, the safest thing you can do, if like you're in New York and like 3 guys approach you in an alleyway and are like, man, give me your wallet, just give them your wallet. Like that is actually like self-defense 101 from like the most trained martial artists on the planet. Like if you talk to a black belt, they're going to give you the advice like of, hey, if you're cornered by like 3 guys and they're trying to take your money, yeah, give them your money. Like it's just kind of a weird thing about it, and that's never been like different. Like there was no era like in the 1950s where it was like normal to be like, you're going to take my wallet, I'm going to scrap with 3 guys. Like, are you kidding me?
Now, see,
Like,
what you're not realizing, Josh, is that there was an era of time. It just
yeah,
wasn't in reality. It was on
yeah,
film.
yeah. That's the thing. I think like they've watched like a ton of John Wayne movies, and they
Because
actually believe
John
that was
Wayne,
the
or I can
West.
think of all the movies in the '80s. Three Ninjas
Yeah.
is just
Oh, that's true.
like it's just a series of movies where you learn enough martial arts, like the
Yeah.
inverse ninja law. Do you know the
Yeah.
inverse ninja law?
What's the inverse ninja law? I love it though.
It might be one of my favorite things that ever happens in any type of story.
Nice.
The number of ninjas is a directly inverse relationship to the quality of their ability to fight. And so, like, one ninja shows up, you are absolutely screwed.
Yeah.
50 ninjas show up, you're going to be fine because you can
Yeah.
take them all.
Yeah. That's actually a good point. I didn't even think of that, but that actually is a really good rule for like a good martial arts flick.
Yeah, it's the
It,
inverse ninja law. If
yeah, that's
one
a
of them
good
is
point.
wearing a different color, that guy's going to be a super bad A. But if
Yeah.
they're all dressed the same and they're in a group, the
Yeah.
more of them there are, the worse of them there are. They're the worse they, or the easier they are to go, and they take turns to fight you.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. I'm like instantly thinking of one of my favorite scenes in Ong Bak, like 2. I don't know if you've ever seen Ong Bak, but like there's a scene in Ong Bak 2 where it's like a notoriously amazing, um, I can't remember I think it's like Thai. It's a form of like Thai boxing that he does.
Mhm.
But it's very brutal looking. But yeah, there's definitely a scene where he like takes out, like a room full of like 80 people. And it is
Mhm.
a little suspicious how, one of them will kind of fight and let them, fight till he gets his arm broken or whatever. And then when his arm's broken, he just kind of backs off or flies
Yeah,
away. And then the next guy comes. Like they never just go, hey, let's all pile on this guy and it's done. That is an interesting thing. But that was before the liberals came, according to that guy, and like
right.
ruined, group fights. Now you can't even get in fights with 50 ninjas.
You're not allowed.
You're not allowed. They won't let you,
The
you
inverse
know?
ninja rule has been outlawed.
Yeah, it's outlawed now. Now you can't even fight one ninja, okay? What are you going to do the next time a ninja like so anyhow, it was an interesting debate to kind of watch a little bit of cuz one of the guys kind of pointed out he's like the way you guys are describing this like world where you have to be this like violent protector of your woman. It sounds like you're talking about like we're all living in Afghanistan or something. Like it's like what city do you live in where like everywhere you go you have to be like ready to like take out like predators, you know? Like it's are we in like some giant action movie? Are we all living in like an area where you're just constantly attacked? Like this is just your life like in the US? Is it like because I know
Like
guys who live in like really rough neighborhoods and like even then it's not like every single time you like go to work like there's guys on the corner like give me your wallet, you know? It's like even New York, like the rougher parts of New York, it's like, you know, most people who live in New York in a bad area will get mugged, but it's not like that mugging's happening like every single day. Like when they get out of their apartment they're like we need your wallet again. I mean,
right.
that wouldn't
Have
even
you
be
seen
profitable for the muggers. You know what I mean? Like at some point, you know, they're going to be like, well, I guess we already drained you of your money. So I guess we'll have to wait a month, you know?
yeah, Steve Martin's L.A. Story? Do you remember
Oh,
that one?
I don't remember that one. I kind of do. It's like a
They
parody, right? Like a,
he's on a date, and they walk outside the restaurant, and this guy walks up to him with a switchblade, and he says, "Hi, my name is Tom. I'll be your mugger for the evening." And he's like, "Thank you. Here you go." And then they just carry it like it's like a daily transaction.
that's so hilarious. That's actually pretty classic. Man, Steve Martin's great. Yeah, but that
Or
was, that cracked me up. Like just
or
this
more
idea
recently,
that like, oh man, there's so many things, Corey, that I think you would have gotten a kick out of. One of the other things the guy had said was he was like, we've gotten away from like, you know, back in the day where you could be the captain of the football team and blah blah blah. And it's like he's talking about this, and it's like you're talking about this as if everyone on the planet was the captain of their football. You realize there's one captain, right? Like that means the majority of people who went to high school were not the captain of their football team. And that's kind of okay. Like it wouldn't make sense to have every single person at a high school be the captain of the football team. Like that would be a really weird football game, you know?
right? Yeah,
It's
I've got
kind
to
of like
run. I've got a
everybody
meeting.
can't be the quarterback. Sorry, what?
I've got to run. I've got a meeting.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it. Have a good one, Corey. It was fun having you by.
Yep. We'll talk to you later.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Corey Kerr, and now we're going to get into some lovely commentary on the next part of this video. It's been fun to have that. Oh, okay. And I think, yeah, I think Scott knew what movie Corey was talking about because he said he peed in the squirt gun. Nice. And then Philip was saying, I've been running back and forth doing laundry. Wanted to say hi to Paul and Holly. Nice. Well, thanks for stopping by. All right, guys, it's going to get spicy. We are very close to done on this. I'm going to have to open another page unless I didn't already where it shows the dog because I need to basically like copy the color of the dog to kind of make sure that's consistent. But the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and wrap up doing these frame. And then we'll play another trailer. And then after the trailer, ladies and gentlemen, if you came for spice, you're getting spice. We're going to watch the rest of the debate that we started watching yesterday. So, featuring the guy that I was kind of talking about with Corey, John Doyle, who's making claims of a long gone past in America where people could fight it out on the playground for broken Legos. So what we're gonna do is we'll play a trailer real quick, and then when we come back, we'll watch that. And this one, since Philip stopped by, why don't we play Philip Chandler's trailer?
Hi, my name is Phil Chandler. I'm a freelance artist, illustrator, and cartoonist. Today, though, however, I want to tell you about a graphic novel I picked up recently called Jacob's Apartment. This book was both written and beautifully illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It is the story of a doomed romance that causes the main character to question his beliefs and his faith, while he's also going through other tragedies in his life. Every page has been illustrated by hand and digitally colored with painstaking detail. It is an emotional story that causes you to think and even question things in your own life. And while the story is a tragedy, it is one that I was completely entertained by and I highly recommend. You can currently find this on Amazon or even check in with your local bookstore and see if you can order it. And while you're at it, you can also check out my Instagram at Phil Chandler Arts and also my YouTube channel by the same name, Phil Chandler Arts. And go buy Jacob's Apartment.
All right, we got that wonderful testimonial from Philip Chandler, and now we're going to get into the spice, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to watch and comment on the rest of this debate, and hopefully we're able to get these flat colors done, because here's my incentive. We were talking about food earlier. I'm getting a little hungry. Guess what I don't get to do until this page is fully flatted out? Oh, before we get into the commentary, before we get into spice, I know people want spice. Let me find a previous page that shows their dog. I believe it's actually pretty early on in the script where we have an image of the dog. And now I'm kind of wondering where that'll be. So this is a set location too, which is great because we've already decided on like colors within that location. By the way, if you guys are watching and you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. That goes a really long way to get these videos viewed more, and that hopefully sells a few more books, which is really helpful. All right, guys, I found the page with the dog. There is our dog and our colors of our dog. This is from page 12, way back in the day. For those of you who've been following a long time, that's going to be great to select the colors from. And now let's get into our active live commentary. Again, this is going to be from the Culture War, episode 20, Debating Masculinity with Destiny, John Doyle and Lauren Chen. So far, the red pill side of this, which I think is being represented by John Doyle, is making it really clear. I think the guy has never dated. That's my suspicion. I don't know. Okay, let's continue. This is continued from yesterday. Oh, we were about to, and I think we're going to an ad about luxuriously spacious, infinitely you. I do not endorse infinity. That's not my ad.
This is a camera lucida, and for the whole of the 19th century, it was the indispensable drawing aid for great masters and technical illustrators.
To be like so bad that they should almost be arrested because it is making me a danger to myself. Like there's probably a legal argument to be made there that it's like threatening my life in a way just because of how stupid that discussion is, because it's exactly as you said. I mean, most people aren't going to get to that point. And if you talked about the core of the issue, which is that men aren't men anymore, everything just falls into place there. You know, there's a great picture that goes viral on Twitter every now and then of like some football player kissing.
By the way, at the beginning of this debate, I mean, we only started this yesterday. He failed to even define what he's calling a man. And so saying like men aren't men anymore. And I think at his introduction, he said, and you know, man is hard to define, but we know it when we say it. And we used to know what that meant. It's like, do we? Like, maybe you should define it so we know what you're saying. It has been lost. Okay, let's continue.
Missing some cheerleader. And the guy's like, do you think that this guy had to like read a book on how to be a man, or like, read forms on how to like talk to girls and get a girlfriend? It just fell into place because he was normal. And men nowadays are very like introverted and antisocial. And so these things don't fall into place. So yeah, I agree. It's like, we were talking about this before the show. It's like almost this weird Revenge of the Nerds fantasy where you've got all these guys who love watching their favorite red pill guy put that OnlyFans girl in line and tell her she's not going to be happy. She's probably happy. I mean, maybe she'll get depressed later, but she's probably doing okay because she's making millions of dollars.
Wait, real quick on that, because again, it's the same as one. Most guys never played football. I don't even know that. Like the majority of guys were not on the high school football team. The football teams are not big enough.
It's actually a really good point because he keeps bringing up like football players and cheerleaders, and it's like, dude, that wasn't the majority of people in high school. Like I think there's like I went to a really small high school. But from what I recall, the football team was, you had varsity and JV, and then like the rest of the school was not playing like football on the team. And then similarly, like I don't think everyone who went to high school was a cheerleader. Like I don't think the majority of women who went to high school were probably not cheerleaders. That doesn't mean there aren't a minority, but it's just bizarre that he's saying the problem. Like he keeps kind of like equating the problem with like modern masculinity. And then he's like, is that they aren't football players or like hanging out with cheerleaders. And it's like, yeah, most people going to high school aren't football players hanging out with cheerleaders. Like that does that connect at all? Like the kind of absurd disconnection with reality that this guy seems to have? Well, let's continue. But I'm glad Destiny's pointing that out.
For one. Number two, I think it's funny that we go to football, for example. Aren't these the guys that like rape and beat their girlfriends more than like any other profession for like NFL players and shit? Like,
what are the demographics? It might be NFL.
So this is recapping a little bit of what we watched yesterday, but yeah, this is a big problem too, where it's like, idealizing, like football players again, like, it's a brutal sport and it usually leaves men pretty like scarred for like the rest of their lives. But keep in mind, for anybody who wasn't tuning into this yesterday, there was a point in time where he was saying that PTSD was caused. This is this John Doyle guy. He made the claim that PTSD, that troops that came back from war experienced PTSD because they weren't in heroic situations anymore and they weren't able to experience valor anymore. And look, that is weird to me. Like the claim that PTSD has something to do with like not experiencing valor rather than just like the sociological effect of, I think sociological is the wrong word. The mental effects that being constantly in threat of your life puts on your body. And it creates like a fight or flight response that is hard to shut off when you've experienced it on an hourly, minute by minute basis. Like the human mind was not made to process that. So coming back to like a scenario where like, you're used to like constantly vying for your life and then somebody's fretting about which grocery store to shop at would be really hard to kind of transition back to and shut off that part of your mind that's ready to fight at like a minute's notice. This John Doyle guy is so clueless. It's bizarre. Okay, let's continue.
Actually, I knew that point was coming up. I knew that.
Not foot, but I think most guys have some
number
experience
actually,
in, like high school level
athletics
athletics or something. I didn't play football. I ran track, played baseball.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if we set the standard as like, don't you want to be the captain of the football team? It's like, damn, most people aren't going to be the captain of the football team. Like, it's just a really
well. I feel like the problem with the red pill community and some conservatives, I wouldn't call them in the sphere of Christian conservatives, but they're so obsessed with talking about how to find the right mate that none of them ever actually get married and live the values that they preach. Like if you're so focused on dating culture, that's great, but it needs to be dating toward marriage. And if you're so obsessed with telling people like you need to find the girl with all the right attributes at the peak age, they're never actually going to find a realistic person and then get married and have a family, which should be the ultimate goal. And I feel like a lot of red pill community people are being called out right now by Christians who have families because it's like what you're doing, you may think that you're trying to fix hookup culture, but you're really just indulging in it.
It's based.
So let's pause here. I just want to also highlight the fact that the first time I looked at like a Tim Pool thing, like I wasn't super familiar with Tim Pool, and I've definitely never seen this like specific show. But the last one we watched was like a debate with Emma Vigeland where he had made a promise. Well, he kind of didn't make a promise, but he kind of said like he felt bad because it was kind of like 2 versus 1 because he had like two people on the right and one person representing the left. And 5 episodes or 4 episodes later, here is Tim Pool now having 3 versus 1, with 3 people on the right versus Destiny on the left. I just wanted to highlight that because at the end of that discussion he had with Emma Vigland, he even said like, "Oh, it's a little unfair. I have the deck stacked a little bit here," and now he's stacked the deck even further. So for anybody who's saying that like Tim Pool is like an above board, good faith interlocutor, explain that to me. Explain that to me. Why he would say, "Hey, this was a little stacked," and then continue to stack even further later episodes on.
Basically the same thing, because it's taking the problem that men are facing and it's just selling them like a repackaged solution, which is that we don't feel as though we have meaning and purpose. And so it's saying, hey, you're upset because you're smoking weed and masturbating. Well, what if instead you were doing better drugs and sleeping with OnlyFans models? It's like the same hedonism. You're just pursuing pleasure at like a higher degree of like exclusivity, I guess.
It would be better off if they said, how about you were eating healthy and working out, and instead of obsessing over, weird porn and video games, you obsessed over, how many reps you could do or how far you could run. But take a look at this. This is from
that thing Tim said. I here's the thing. I'm gonna be as good faith as possible. During this again, like this is just something I do to kind of occupy the time whilst I am working on flat colors, and it seems to be something people who watch this YouTube channel enjoy. So I'm gonna continue doing it until I hear otherwise from my audience. But so far, these are getting more views and stuff, and it's fun because I'd probably be listening to things like this anyway while working on comics. So it's just a way for us all to kind of hang out and listen to this kind of stuff. But I do try to be pretty good faith about my kind of take on debates when I'm listening to them, because I like to analyze how people are doing and stuff. And, I'm going to be fair to Tim Pool here. That's actually a pretty good point. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with, telling like men, especially young men, like, if you're frustrated in life with stuff, it's not a bad idea to like try to take that frustration and do something positive, like work out or, seek better employment or, like pursue kind of improving your communication skills or like improving something about yourself. I think that is not ever going to be a bad message to tell anyone, where it's like, hey, you can take, like a negative situation and you can like wallow in it and lay in bed all day or play video games forever. Or you can take that time you're investing. I say this all the time regarding comics, where it's like a lot of people like waste a lot of time. They will complain like, I have no time to work on these things. And then you analyze their life and it's like, well, you watch that TV show for like 2 hours a day, and it's like, okay, well, so like you could be taking that time where you're like watching a TV show 2 hours a day and like you could actually be working on a graphic novel. And I've met people like this, who are like, oh man, I'd love to work on my book, but I just don't have time. And then you find out like they're spending like the amount of time that most cartoonists would be sitting down and working on comics. And they're spending that time like playing video games or, like winding down, like watching TV. And if you like do the math, they have like 3 or 4 hours a day where they could be, working on, something more productive. And, that just, I mean, again, like not everybody's perfect. We're all juggling a million things, some people are working really hard jobs. Like, when I think of like somebody like a nurse who's like faced with just death every day, like when you get home, I think the idea of like, winding down and like watching TV and stuff might be like almost like necessary for like survival in that kind of job, with the type of PTSD you'd be experiencing, and not the PTSD that this John Doyle guy is describing, but actual PTSD, so I can understand like everybody's different, but I don't think it's bad. Like, I don't think it's bad to tell young men to try to improve themselves and improve their lives. I don't think self-improvement is necessarily a bad thing. I just think it takes a really bad and bizarre turn from the little I've seen of that kind of community. And so, yeah, like I actually agree with Tim Pool on that specific take, because I think that's interesting. Now let's see if he stays good faith with his take or if he goes to like the dark side now. Let's see.
date psychology. This is a relatively older story that goes back to 2018. Young male virginity on the rise from 2008. In 2008, men under the age of 30 reported 8% reported being virgins. Now 27%. I'm curious why you think that is and whether you guys think it's a good or bad thing.
I would be careful with this because I think there was recent data that showed that this is like a pretty unfortunate blip. You could try to find this, but that red pillars for, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a data point that came out that was similar to this. And obviously all the red pillars are like, oh my God, young men are getting laid. All the women are hypergamous and they're all fucking the one Chad guy, blah, blah, blah. But I think the most recent data shows that it's basically back to where it was before, that it was probably a blip like pre or during COVID or whatever. You could try and find that though. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
do you have any idea of what the source might be?
Fuck, I don't even know what you would Google. I'll look around for it. Okay, do my best.
Yeah, but so let's operate into the assumption it may be true. Is it a good or bad thing? And
here's the catch. And I'll say this: Destiny will rarely will say like, "Oh, I found this to be true," and then it won't be that way in his statistic. By the way, I'm noticing a slight lag in the camera. I think that might be I have a lot of things running. So if you're hearing like delays, especially in the audio, just let me know. But we'll continue to try to kind of work on the flats for this entire page. I noticed an area of white that I had forgotten to deselect, which is the drapes that are kind of, it's like these old Victorian drapes or curtains that they used to have over beds. So that's what we're working on. Let's continue our commentary.
And I'll tell you why I ask. One, I'm sure a lot of conservatives and Christians are like based,
based like, young men waiting for marriage.
Yeah, and
stay pure, kings.
And so Seamus Coughlin, for instance, a good friend, he's on Timcast IRL fairly often. He is very Catholic, and when I mentioned this, he said based, and I said it's not. We're talking about guys who are 28 who should be married, like by the conservative standard, should be married and should not be virgins. If we're talking about 28-year-old, 30-year-old men who are a third of them who are virgins, we're talking about guys who have not like gotten married. They're not having a family, they're not having kids, and they're not having any relationships at all.
So, I mean, I personally want to be careful here to not shame virgins or, anything like that. But I think when we look at the more macro level, you're right. This is a trend that is not a good thing because in a healthy society, we should be seeing people getting married, having those relationships and starting their families. And I think the reason why that's not happening for a lot of men is because the incentive of pursuing a relationship has been destroyed for many reasons. Number one, we have pornography, which, I mean, obviously sex throughout history has been a pretty great motivator for men.
I just find this really bizarre because I don't think that I think quite often, like, there are statistics like that. Like, I think what Destiny was citing was actually probably pretty likely because what I would imagine, this is me just using my brain for a couple seconds. I would imagine that during lockdowns, that number would increase. Like, I would imagine that might be probably like the most probable and reasonable expectation is when you kind of isolate people, those numbers are going to increase. I'm guessing that as you have people be social again, those numbers will kind of return to normal. That's the wild guess I would make if I had to like just make a wild out there kind of assertion. And I will be interested in seeing if Destiny kind of comes back in this conversation with statistics to kind of back up what he was suggesting.
And frankly, there's just for a lot of men, they're looking at the dating market, they're looking at dealing with women, and they're thinking, why bother? I can get whatever I want on the internet, which is not a healthy thing because, I mean, sex is about more than just the physical aspect of it. You want to be building a relationship with somebody. And I think we also have a lot of young men who are just frankly feeling so demoralized. They're dropping out of society in a lot of different ways besides relationship, like work and everything. And it's all just contributing to, I guess, men not doing so.
This whole like incel thing is so weird to me. Like, it just seems like such a weird new phenomenon, and it kind of reminds me of like Travis Bickle. I don't know if you guys remember like Taxi Driver. It kind of reminds me of that. Like, it's like, are we really full of like a society of just like a bunch of Travis Bickles just like driving their taxi cab, just getting more and more filled with rage and just incapable of kind of having conversations with women? I don't see society heading that direction, but I hope not. That'd be depressing. We're having a little bit of lag here, so hopefully my my spinning pinwheel will
Yeah, I remember when that headline came out, there were a lot of tradcaths on Twitter who were like,
What is a
based, reject
tradcath?
degeneracy. But
Yeah,
that's
not
great.
happening.
I'm not shaming virgins. However, there is more context to that number. I mean, there's no way that 27% of guys, even if that figure is slightly outdated or maybe significantly outdated, are actually abstaining. I mean, maybe there is this sort of like revolt against the modern world. I want to abstain from guys who are maybe more online, more involved in right-wing politics. But the average guy nowadays who is in that age demographic, who's a virgin, isn't like living a sexually chaste lifestyle. I mean, he's probably addicted to pornography and he probably struggles to make eye contact with waitresses, probably just like a very...
I'm sorry, this guy like makes so many wild jumps and assertions. Like, you know, again, if that statistic is literally because of the shutdowns and the fact that like people were isolated for, you know, an entire like 2 years almost, that would make a little more sense. But like this is one thing that bugs me on either side is when people will hear like a mild statistic that could be due to a bunch of different causes. And they'll instantly just make a correlation into a causation without any sort of evidence to back it. If it just so happens to kind of back their worldview. It's a really interesting leap he's doing here. I'm going to be curious, you know, because it's like, oh, this is a great leap to get into my talking points. But it's like, is that statistic, you know, really saying what you're saying it's saying? Would be kind of a good thing to establish before kind of taking that wild leap, especially if what I'm hoping happens. Again, this is the first time I've watched this. I started watching it, you know, yesterday, and then like we're continuing it today. But it's like I'm hoping that, you know, this statistic will be proven to be something from the COVID era, because then at that point he spent all this time using this statistic as a leg to back an argument. And if that leg gets knocked out, he's going to be in a pretty dire position. This is one of the things about like generally when you're making an argument and you're standing it on say like stilts, you want to make sure those stilts are going to hold up, because if one of the stilts gets knocked out, your argument's not going to look so compelling. Let's continue.
You know, introverted, antisocial guy. I think that's because of, you know, maybe the father wasn't present. I think fathers are like pretty much almost chiefly in charge of like the child's socialization. Like you can usually tell, this is interesting too, when a child is raised by just their father, you usually can't tell, but when they're raised by just their mother, you can tell much easier, I think. I think because it largely affects.
Are you a Christian man who is silently suffering from that super secret thing in your life?
Affects how the child develops
Weird,
like, socially.
Wait, in traditional families, doesn't the mother do most of the parenting? Like, isn't the traditional thing that the dad goes to work, he comes home, he kind of watches TV and chills a little bit? You might interact with the kids a little bit, but traditionally, I feel like the mothers are the ones that are like driving their kids to school, taking their kids to football practice. So that's like generally the mom's thing, and like the traditional relationships.
Probably, but I think dads play with especially their boys, a lot more in ways that are engaging. They allow their boys to do things that are like more, I guess, adventurous or risky. And I think that really like helps the way that they view the world and themselves as not fragile. Because if you're antisocial, I mean, what are you ultimately afraid of? This person is not going to like me. They're not going to talk to me. I'm just going to kind of stay in my bubble. If you have a dad who's letting you like climb to the top of the play structure, play on rocks, things like that.
Yeah, Chris Cavagio said, yeah, that was a weird ad. Yeah, I agree. You know, like, okay, here's the thing. Again, like I'm going to try to be as good at faith as possible. You know, this John Doyle guy's been pretty like out there. Like he seems like a guy who was like maybe born on a different planet. When it comes to like his connection with reality, like his description of PTSD was like insane. I don't think anyone with PTSD or anyone with war experience would have categorized it as what he was categorizing it as. His description of dating and like high school indicates to me that maybe he didn't actually attend a high school. I don't know. It's very bizarre, because like in his mind, like every single person attending high school was like a football player, and you know, was dating cheerleaders. I think that was just like, apparently back in the 50s, everybody was the captain of their football team, which is a weird statistic that doesn't align with any reality. Apparently back in the day, you know, at schools, boys would just get in brutal fist fights over their Legos being broken. There's been a lot of, apparently there's estrogen in the water. He's said some really outlandish, wild things, but I'll give him credit on this. I will say, I don't think that's off in the sense that a father will generally kind of play different with their sons, or, you know, than like a mother would. That doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the other, but I don't think his description's like super off on this. So that's interesting. He's actually made a point that's not absolutely nutty. While we're at it, we're at the 1 hour and 30-minute mark, but I need to step away for a second. So we're going to play another trailer. And this one, I believe, is Christopher Runciman's trailer. I was on Christopher's channel yesterday. We had a really fun conversation. Okay, I'm going to play this, and then we'll come back, and we'll continue flatting this page.
Hi, my name's Chris, and I like comics. I want to talk about this comic for a second here. I just got this in. I ordered it direct from my local comic shop through Diamond Distributing. It's Joshua Kemble's Jacob's Apartment. I really enjoyed this book. There's all kinds of comics out there, let's be honest. There's fun comics, there's superhero comics, there's young adult comics, there's adventure comics for kids. There's so many different things under the planet. But there's also an entire subgenre of alternative books. Real life, real world depictions in comic book form. Situations that happen to each and every one of us. And this is a fine example of that. If you get a chance, order this book from your local comic shop. You won't be disappointed. I can't sing its praises high enough. Okay? Check it out. Jacob's Apartment by Joshua Kemble.
Okay, while I was giving John credit, though, I do want to say there's one thing to point out. I'm giving him credit for a point he was making on a walk back. Because his initial point was that like all socialization is usually driven by the father, and that's not the case. Like Destiny pointed out in a really good way, which is like traditionally, like it's actually women who usually are driving their kids to school, that are kind of making sure their kids get to practice, that are making sure these things happen. The roughhousing, yeah, that traditionally tends to be more of a male kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like bizarre that this guy, again, like, it's interesting too, because like I'm in my 40s, so it's weird to hear like a 20-year-old like waxing intellectual about relationships, where it's like I don't think this guy's been in a relationship. His longest relationship most likely is like maybe 4 years, so it's like coming from the perspective of somebody who has like over a decade of experience, like with having a wife and a family and stuff like that. It's just bizarre to hear these like wacky red pill takes where people just seem really disconnected from like the reality that I've seen around me with like friends of mine, where they'll make these statements like it's like most men are like attracted to like women in their early 20s. And it's like, dude, I'm a man in my 40s. I'm very attracted to women in their 40s. Like I'm attracted to my wife, like it's bizarre to me, the idea that like all these men are just like sitting around like desiring like 20-year-old women. It's just a weird take. It's very abstracted, because I'm like, I have a lot of friends my age. Like I know maybe one person who's in my age range who's like dating women in their 20s, and they're not a happy person. Like they're a really miserable person because they're kind of never able to contain or have a relationship. It's very bizarre that's like painted as like this ideal, I don't know. Anyhow, let's continue.
You're going to be like, wait a minute. I have agency. I am sovereign. I am not afraid. I am not fragile. And I think that does actually affect how boys grow up and become young men.
But this guy's depiction of fragility is not to get in a fist fight over somebody breaking your Legos. Like, to me, that's not fragile. That's smart. Like, why would you risk like a fist fight over Legos? Also, does this dude look like a guy who's ever been in a fist fight? Like, I just want to point that out too. I wouldn't bring up appearance, except that he's talking about like fragility, and it's like, dude, you don't look so like he doesn't look like a non-fragile dude. Okay, let's continue.
It's not just boys, but also women. Like the effect of fatherlessness is just as stark for women as it is for men. You can actually chart like likelihood of teenage pregnancy, age of losing your virginity for a woman. There's a big influence that fathers have on girls too.
I think something that so that article that you brought up, this was
again, like, why is this considered profound? Like, yeah, fathers play a role in their kids. Like, so do mothers. Like, what is the point here? Like, what is the profound thing that's causing entire movements where like people have huge YouTube channels and entire careers like selling these truisms? It's like, what is the point of this? Like, do people actually get something out of this? Like, I feel like it's almost like a repackaged thing where it's taking things that are just truisms, like, like you can better yourself. Okay, that's a great message, like there's nothing wrong with the idea of bettering yourself. Or, hey, if you want to look better, maybe exercise. Oh my gosh, it's the most profound. Like, it's not profound. That's just age old advice. It's really bizarre that this is like being considered like how is this the Matrix? And like, we've taken the red pill and realized that instead of like sitting around in my room playing video games all day, maybe I should lift some weights. Like, this is the big profound red pill. I just don't. Sorry. Anyhow, let's continue.
Was the one that I was familiar with, actually, and I had read it. I just saw the headline, so I thought it was something different. I think that so all of these explanations are like fun, and they kind of fit into our narrative of like fathers are important, blah blah blah, which they are. I agree with, but there's always this huge like monster lurking beneath the water that people seem a little bit reticent to blame or attack because it's not as much fun. It doesn't play into our fun narratives. But I think that the two huge things that they play into each other. One is lack of types of socialization, and two is the explosiveness of the internet, which is dramatically played into that. I think that the internet has fundamentally and radically altered the way that we associate with each other. In some ways, positively. You could talk to people all across the world. You can come on shows like Tim Pool's, and you can do all this stuff, which is cool. But
this is actually like a really like, again, like, this is reinforcing why I tend to enjoy watching Destiny speak. It's like, that's actually a really valid point. It's like, hey, have they considered other things? Because again, it's that weird correlation causation thing, right? Where it's like, guys are having trouble dating. It's like, have you thought that like maybe people are just getting more kind of isolated in general, and maybe that's the issue? Like, does it have to be like everybody has ceased to be a John Wayne movie, and this is a big problem? It's like people were never a John Wayne movie. It's just so weird that like people have this weird fake history. But I'm not surprised, because a lot of these people advocate for like false history to be taught. There's like I forget like Trump's whole history thing where he was trying to actually create a history curriculum where they took out like any slave narrative from like the history of the US, because they was just like trying to like almost like whitewash history and like be like, we need to bring back heroes in history. And like the whole idea was like to teach people a false history so they could have like a sense of pride in their country or something. And like, don't get me wrong, like it's good to learn good things about your country. You probably shouldn't be just like walking around hating where you live. But at the same time, like, you also probably shouldn't like close your eyes and plug your ears and pretend everything was like the Wild West where everybody was John Wayne back in the day and America did no wrong. It's just a really, I don't know, it's like a winner take all strategy that's just so bizarre, where it's like we're willing to lie, we're willing to kind of create like our own like weird statistics to kind of make like our strange point, and probably take money from like subscriptions and like coaching programs and all that kind of stuff that you can get like these poor young men like suckered into because they're uncomfortable talking to women and they don't have like an older brother or a father to just say like, hey, just get over your fear and ask her out or something. Like, it's very strange. So instead they have to like enroll in these like institutions to basically be told like truisms, like it's good to exercise and not be socially awkward.
Other ways incredibly negatively, and that a lot of the cool things that happen with human socialization aren't things that like your parents necessarily prepare you for. They're not things that you read a book about and meditate on. They're things that just kind of happen naturally. When I was in high school, first of all, social media didn't exist really, thank God. We had like MySpace and LiveJournal. Cell phones were used to like set up social events, and the social media that did exist, like Facebook, was exclusively used to like track parties, right? So if you've got a group of friends that you see in real life you see their friends, you see their friends of friends, and then you go to like parties to talk with other people. You go to parties, you see other people. In these environments, a few things happen. One, you're more likely to do like things like drinking and whatnot. Two, you're more likely to have driver's license. Three, you're more likely to see girls or guys. And then four, you're more likely to go on dates and have sex. There's a lot of graphs listed. If you're looking at the same thing, because I looked it up to check this article. If you look at like the bottom of these that page, you can see the numbers on a lot of these socialization things have actually gone down quite a bit. So the difference between 94 and 2014, so that's not even all the way to 2023 where we're at now, right? In 1994, 84.7% of 12th graders had a driver's license. That number was down below 7.
What did I tell you? I just wanted to bring this up. Like Destiny doesn't tend to.
And
just
so I think
talk.
that's kind of what we're seeing, just because men haven't really been taught by their fathers, who they're largely absent from their lives.
Sorry, somehow that backed up. There's some weird connection stuff happening. The one thing I was going to say is, like, I had mentioned this before. One thing I like about Destiny in these kind of debates is he's usually not going to let something slip where he's like, oh, there's a statistic and I don't have it. Like, he'll usually come back with it, which is actually a unique thing in this space where a lot of people just kind of talk. Sorry, we'll have to recap a little bit of what we already listened to.
In the first place now, how to actually be a man. And now people don't even know what that means. Like if you ask someone how to be a man, and even you look in like in the red pill community, they'll say, well, being a man is like, you know, having
way
sex
too much. So we're gonna go forward to, I think we were at like about 30 something. So we'll just find where we were.
You see all these kids now exploiting like family dysfunction for clout. Like my dad won't say that George Floyd's life matters. And Dad's like,
oh no, oh my gosh, this John Doyle guy is just a winner. Okay, let's continue.
He says, hey, what's up? We want to go to dinner and then drive down to the lake. And she's like, wow, that sounds like way more.
Okay, let's go back.
Letting you like climb to the top of the play structure, play on rocks, things like that. You're going to be like, wait a minute.
Okay, I think we were at 20 something. Hang on.
And so Seamus Coughlin, for instance, a good friend, he's on Tim Kessler IRL fairly often. He is very Catholic. And when I mentioned this, he said based. And I said, it's not. We're talking about guys who are 28 who should be married, like by the conservative standard, should be married and should not be virgins.
My apologies. I don't know what's going on.
And I think that really like helps the way that they view the world and themselves as not fragile.
We'll just
if you're antisocial. I mean, what are you ultimately afraid of? This person is not going to like me. They're not going to talk to me. I'm just going to kind of stay in my bubble. If you have a dad who's letting you like climb to the top of the play structure, play on rocks, things like that, you're going to be like, wait a minute. I have agency. I am sovereign. I am not afraid. I am not fragile. And I think that does actually affect how boys grow up and become young men.
Not just boys, but also women. Like the effect of fatherlessness is just as stark for women as it is for men. You can actually chart like likelihood of teenage pregnancy, age of losing your virginity for a woman. There's a big influence that fathers have on girls too.
I think something that so that article that you brought up, this was the one that
Okay, we are going to go back to the Destiny thing, but there's another thing I want to point out, which is like, are they showing like stats where it's like suddenly like fatherlessness is just like this huge growing thing? Like I would think you'd want to have stats on that as well if you're going to make like such a wild claim that like all of this is just due to like absent fathers or something. Because it's like, yeah, absent fathers like definitely have an effect on, you know, lives and stuff like that. But this idea of like this world where like everyone's walking around without a dad, it's a very bizarre. I don't know if that's exactly the case. It's kind of a weird assertion to make, and I'd want to see statistics on that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't, you know, I'm a cartoonist and I'm working on a historical fiction graphic novel, so I'm not like sitting around researching statistics on like youth and dating, but it just sounds like a very wild assertion being made. That being said, I'm going to finish deselecting this dog, and then we will continue. We got a dog, ladies and gentlemen. A dog. Okay, let's continue.
I was familiar with actually, and I had read it. I just saw the headline, so I thought it was something different. I think that so all of these explanations are like fun and they kind of fit into our narrative of like fathers are important, blah, 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 which they are. I agree with. But there's always this huge like, monster lurking beneath the water that people seem a little bit reticent to blame or attack because it's not as much fun. It doesn't play into our fun narratives. But I think that the two huge things that they play into each other. One is lack of types of socialization, and two is the explosiveness of the internet, which has dramatically played into that. I think that the internet has fundamentally and radically altered the way that we associate with each other. In some ways, positively, you could talk to people all across the world. You can come on shows like Tim Pool's, and you can do all this stuff, which is cool. But in other ways, incredibly negatively, in that a lot of the cool things that happen with human socialization aren't things that like your parents necessarily prepare you for. They're not things that you read a book about and meditate on. They're things that just kind of happen naturally. naturally. When I was in high school, first of all, social media didn't exist really. Thank God. We had like MySpace and LiveJournal. Cell phones were used to like set up social events, and the social media that did exist, like Facebook, was exclusively used to like track parties, right? If you've got a group of friends that you see in real life, you see their friends, you see their friends of friends, and then you go to like parties to talk with other people. You go to parties, you see other people. In these environments, a few things happen. One, you're more likely to do like things like drinking and whatnot. Two, you're
Sorry, it is bizarre, and this might just be my age speaking or something, but it's bizarre to me that it has to be explained that like social media has like caused people to become a little more isolated. Even though it's caused more connection, it's also caused more kind of distance and like a different kind of social dynamic in general. I don't think that's a wild assertion, but now that I think about it, if you're a person who like never lived in a time where there was no internet, then or like internet was like a mild thing. I think I'm slightly older than Destiny. For in fact, I know I'm slightly older than Destiny, but it's like I think that is not a light stat to just kind of cast aside. They have white bed sheets. That's what I'm looking at here. So it looks like we're gonna again have another area of white that we kind of need to deselect. I think first I'll do the dog's mouth here and just get that kind of filled in. And what we'll do is we'll just use hue saturation and just lower the lightness a little bit and then increase the saturation just a tad bit. And that should give us like a nice red for his this dog's tongue. And then I think we're done with the dog and we can go on to the bed sheets here. I'm going to go ahead and save. And it's going to be interesting because she's wearing white and then the bed sheets are white. I want to see if I change the sheet color at all later on, because the current one I'm looking at is like page 25. So I want to see a couple pages later where there's sequences to see if I ever showed like a different color of bed sheet. That would be helpful to see. Chris said, I would hope for more nuance these days, but just a tendency in history. Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably the case. I'm also noticing that the sound thing I'm using might be kind of weird. So, no, I think we're good. Okay, good. Okay, let's continue this while I'm hunting for that color of bed sheet in case there was.
You're more likely to have driver's license. 3, you're more likely to see girls or guys. And then 4, you're more likely to go on dates and have sex. There's a lot of graphs listed. If you're looking at the same thing, because I looked it up to check this article. If you look at like the bottom of these that page, you can see the numbers on a lot of these socialization things have actually gone down quite a bit. So the difference between 94 and 2014, so that's not even all the way to 2023 where we're at now, right? In 1994, 84.7% of 12th graders had a driver's license. That number was down below 73%, so an 12 point drop by 2014. The tried alcohol number had decreased by 15 points. The had gone on a date decreased by 25 points. Worked a job for pay dropped by 16 points, right? You see this like trend towards more education because you got to go to college to get a degree, and more socialization done exclusively online. And I don't know what Discord servers you hang out with, but they tend to be very gender segregated. If you're on a Discord server where you're talking about like edgy jokes and like video games and stuff all the time, there are no girls in there ever. No, not to knock any of the servers, but yeah, I think the internet has a lot of the life that worked for us only worked because it was so on rails. You go to school, you have your friends, you have all this, and the internet stuff has like changed a lot of our socialization in some ways for the worse.
I agree. I wanted to respond because there's one thing that we've talked about quite a bit, and that's dating apps. And I think cell phones in particular, not just the internet. You mentioned Facebook being used to track parties and stuff, but that was
you just like sign in, yeah.
But that was probably back in it was all desktop. You know, was that
true?
Cell phone ubiquity around 2007, 2008. All of a sudden, everyone's online every single moment of the day. I've been on the internet my whole life, but I remember I'd go out to the skate park. I have no idea what's going on in the world. I have a candy bar phone. Then I'd go.
Sorry, this is always funny to me when Tim Pool plays the like, "Hey skaters, I'm one of you." Like, where he's like, "I'd go to the skate park with my guitar. I'm one of you, cool kids." Anyhow, let's continue. He seemed. I haven't seen a lot of his content, but it just cracks me up. I keep thinking of the Steve Buscemi bit where he's like, "Hey, cool kids." All right, let's continue.
Go back home, get on the computer and see what's going on Facebook and go, oh, how about that? Then we get, with the advent of the iPhone, the Galaxy from Android and all that stuff. Now all of a sudden we're online 24/7. And so one of the things I think plays a role in the increase in male virginity into a higher age is the expanded dating pool for younger women. So
okay, I just looked and it is white sheets. Yeah, Chris was saying, hello, fellow young people. Exactly. I feel like that perfectly describes Tim Pool. Like, I feel like somebody should do a meme where it's like Tim Pool with like a skateboard and a band t-shirt or something, saying, hello, fellow young people. Anyhow, let's continue.
Oh, and I'm not saying this is absolute. I'm saying it's likely a contributing factor. So you have, as Destiny, you've explained, it used to be like the in-person interactions was a large component of how we did things. You get a group of young people between the ages of 18 and 22. They're all in college, and that's their social circles. They know each other. They talk to each other. There's some expanded network because someone knows somebody who went to a different school. So you might be hanging out in Chicago, and you're like, hey, there's a party near UIC. We're going to go there. Then it's like, oh, no, there's a party near Loyola. Different school, different network, but people know each other. Still, however, the women and the men are all of very comparable ages.
Loyola like
then we get
Christian
mobile
school?
apps like OkCupid and Tinder and things like this, where you get online dating. Now, those 18 to 22-year-old women in universities who normally would have a network 80% comprised of men their own age.
Oh, no.
Now we're on dating apps where they're getting dudes who are 30 with careers, money, convertibles, whatever.
This is like another one of those weird red pill arguments, as if everyone in the world is only dating through dating apps. And again, I haven't been in like the dating scene in a long time, and I'm so thankful for it. Like, I wouldn't want to be. Like, I'm very content where I am. But it's like, it is so bizarre to me, the idea that like people are not meeting in person anymore. They're only meeting on dating apps. That's just absurd. And the idea that like the reason men are having problems is like the competition is just much more fierce. It's like, nah, I don't know. Like, I still know a lot of people in the real world that you know, like meet because they went to school together, or meet because they volunteer or do something like similar, or work together. Like, these are things that still occur. I don't know. I find it weird. Like, and I think this claim's really hard to back, because you would think if that was the case, like, you would see a statistic of people not dating people within their own economic class. And I think from what I recall, most people tend to date kind of within their own economic sphere. They don't always date up, like in this weird way that the red pill always is trying to claim. And so it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But I feel like this is just a very weird point that Tim seems to be trying to make, is like, well, it's because of the dating apps and all the women are going for these wealthy guys. The competition's so much fiercer. I don't know, dude. Is that true? Again, I might be just, maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe that is, but it doesn't ring true to me. But I don't know. We'll find out.
Whatever you want to say, they're now in the competition with these younger guys. How is a 20-year-old guy going to compete with a 28-year-old guy? Young woman, let's say she's 20 years old. She has a network of friends, and then someone messages her on Facebook or whatever and says, hey, you want to go hang out and catch a movie later? And she goes, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Sounds super cool. Then she's on Tinder. She gets matched with some dude who's 28, who's got, makes 50, 60,000 a year, has got a car, has got his own apartment. He says, hey, what's up? You want to go to dinner and then drive down to the lake? And she's like, wow, that sounds like way more fun. How is a younger guy going to compete with that?
I mean, it's hard, but there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, there's only so many older guys.
Yeah.
It can't be like every older guy has like 5 women because they're all younger and he's dating all the age bills. So one, there's only so many older guys. Two, I think to some extent this has always been kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Or that like there can be older guys. I don't want to say creepy guys, but remember the whole Roy Moore thing, where even in that focus group, some of the people are like, I'd be honored if my 16 or 18-year-old daughter was hit on by a 30, 40-year-old lawyer or whatever. The CNN or somebody did a focus group on that. Some of those answers were wild. So I think to some extent that's always been a problem. But here, like, this is the thing I will reiterate, and it's sad because we've lost it. People always obsess over trying to figure out like who's fucking who. Are women hypergamous? Are men chasing younger women? Blah blah blah. If you spend a lot of time in the real world, and the data does bear this out, the people that date and have sex with each other are the people that are in the same space as each other. That has always been true.
Yep.
It's funny because people online will say things like, "Oh, don't fuck your coworkers."
He's not wrong. Like, I think that's kind of what a little bit along the lines of what I was saying. It's like I don't think the dynamics have changed all that much, and actually, that's a really good point. It's like I think the older men thing's always been a problem or an issue. I don't know. It just seems like a non-issue. It's really bizarre to kind of hear some of these weird takes.
Coworkers are always fucking at every server's job, at every fucking white collar. Coworkers are in the fucking YouTube world. Coworkers are always fucking each other. Number one, people that go to school are making friends, making girlfriends, boyfriends. They're always doing this. People in the same socioeconomic class, people that are similar race, people like in general, these trends are very true. If you are in places where you're spending a lot of time around the opposite sex, you will date and you will have sex. Like it just as an evolution of our human history, that's always going to happen. But if you start to remove yourself from these spaces, so as young men especially, if you're entering these majors where it's like 95% men, if you're in comp sci, and then from there you bounce into a job that's
or
like,
if your socialization is online with
Yep,
people
your
playing
socialization.
video games, it's going to be exclusively male almost.
Exactly. Yeah. You're online, you're doing heavily male majors. And then when you get to your working life, it's 98% men. Like you're fucked. Where are you going to meet women? Right. At that point, are you going to go from, okay, I'm logging off of League of Legends today. I'm going to hop on Tinder when I haven't talked to a girl in like 6 years because all of the majors you chose were male dominated. Now you're working like that. You have to be in spaces with women and start to communicate with them. And that's like the most important thing when it comes to determining success for dating, I think, to even have the opportunity to.
It's weird to me that that's like some profound point. Like the idea that like weirdly enough, like to date women, men should talk to women. Like that's I don't know. That seems a little more profound than the idea of us like entering Thunderdome arenas where we're constantly getting in fistfights, I don't know. To me, that sounds a little more realistic and more true to my own experience. But, we'll see how John responds to this. I'm kind of curious where John will go with this.
I think that's way more important than being 6 feet tall or going to the gym all the time or doing those other things. You have to have the practice to do it. You have to be in the right spaces for it to work.
I think you're right. And they've even done studies about the likelihood of relationships where you've met online versus in real life and the longevity of them. And relationships online, a lot of people have met online now and are married because it's not really a new.
Paul was saying these guys are lecturing on how to pick up chicks. Yeah, I think so. It's like a red pill thing. There's this whole like weird space online of people who are like psychotically obsessed, and they kind of like charge a bunch of incels money to give them advice. And quite often the advice is like this very bizarre take on life where it's like, you need to be this extra buff like warrior who's beating people up and constantly getting into fist fights in order to compete in the market, and men are no longer men. It's like this weird kind of take on things that seems really bizarrely it just seems like very out of touch with reality, but it seems to be quite profitable for some people online, and it's also ends up being something very funny to watch while working on my comic. Speaking of, where are we at for time? And by the way, Paul, how's it going? You would be proud of me, Paul. I drew some pants on one of my characters. I just thought you might get a kick out of that. Let's see here. That was a Christopher Runciman's dream joke. They always joke about Paul and pants. Let's see here. We're going to deselect this part of the bed here. And then we're going to go ahead and that's one area where I missed the color fill. I think we're good other than that. So for the bed, okay, here's the bed frame. And we're going to kind of deselect that. And then we just need to fill the sheets here, and then we'll take another real quick break so that I can get some water. Yeah, Paul, this has been a really weird kind of debate I'm doing commentary on. It's another one of those Tim Pool culture war things, because I wanted to give him another chance. Even though I vehemently thought he got crushed on the Emma Vigeland conversation, I just thought, out of fairness to, Tim Pool fans out there, I ought to give the guy another crack. And so far, okay. He isn't striking me as like incredibly intelligent. He is stacking the deck against his guests that lean left because he is having like 2 versus 1. or I should say 3 versus 1, whereas the last time he had 2 versus 1 and apologized because he said it was unfair to have 2 versus 1. This time he has 3 versus 1, which is an interesting thing to note. But the other thing that's fascinating about this is he is doing a better job at like kind of moderating and not being the debater. You know, so I will give him credit for that. Like on this one, it seems like he's more allowing his guests to have the discussion, which I think is supposed to be the format of the show. And then Paul was saying characters don't need pants. That's just gratuitous. Exactly. Okay. I will be right back. I'm going to play we're at the 2-hour mark. So we're going to play a trailer and then I'll come back with more spice for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't yet hit the like button, I'll be right back. Here is the trailer for 2 Stories. All right. Hopefully everybody's having a productive work day. We're actually getting really close to finishing up the flats for this page. I'm happy with how they're coming out so far. There's going to be a lot less brown in it. Paul said, your response is way more entertaining than the actual debate. Tim is a tool. I agree. Is that horrible to say? But again, I'm open to having my mind changed. You know, maybe Tim Pool is a nice guy. I'm going to do a quick shout out. I'm wearing a Young and the Dead t-shirt. Scott Circlin, my buddy, has an amazing comic book called The Young and the Dead. And we'll do one more shout out as well. Paul Pate, who's in the chats, also has an amazing comic book, a series called Detective Perez. And I really enjoy these books. They're like, if you're into like kind of detective stories, hard-boiled detective stories, the first one has vampires and it's a hard-boiled detective story. It's great. And the second one is called The Rust City Stabber. They're both really good books. Paul was kind enough to I need to scan this because I'm trying to get a collection of like drawings of me. The one that I start the show with was done by Philip Chandler. It was a really nice little gift. And then there was also this drawing by Paul in the book when we met up in person. I really appreciated that. And then our listener Vic also did some drawings too and sent those to me as well. It's kind of fun to collect those. Chris K said, incels, pickup artists, men's rights groups. There's a weird Venn diagram of toxicity out there. Yeah, it kind of reminds me, was it Magnolia that kind of made fun of like men's rights, like misogynists? I think it was Magnolia. Was that the movie with Tom Cruise? My wife's like listening to music or something while working, so I don't think she heard that. But I was trying to remember what that movie is where Tom Cruise plays like a pickup artist guy. But anyhow, yeah, we're in a weird Venn diagram of toxicity here. Let's continue listening and see if there's any. Again, Destiny seems to be kind of the voice of reason. So
you think there's no stigma saying, oh, we met online, but there is still something different than being able to meet that person organically, spend time with them. And I think it's a lot more how our parents or grandparents used to like meet and court each other, rather than online dating has almost tried to make your love life into, it's too commoditized, I think, for a lot of people.
I think that the influence of the dad still plays into that, just insofar as like, you know, if your son is terminally online and you can tell that he.
Do you feel like maybe some of the red pill just have like some father issues? Like it just seems like, man, there's some heavy like hurt, you know? It's almost like it's just kind of bizarre because I'm like hearing it and I'm like, how is the other thing is, again, like dressing this up as if it's like new and profound. It's like it's kind of misogyny with just like a different coat, you know. It's a weird. It's just weird as like an artist who, you know, went to art school and stuff. I saw like, you know, like we were pretty open and accepting people, and I just don't understand like how any of this stuff is like bizarre or new or like all that profound. Like, but also I don't understand the reality that a lot of these guys seem to think we're in like, you know, a Street Fighter video game where like in order to walk down the street, you need to be able to like, you know your punches and kicks because there's just ninjas that are going to be flying at you from every corner. Let's continue.
Is sort of developing asocially, you should like interfere, but it's sort of actually like the stereotype that he laid out where, you know, the dad comes home and he's just like drinking beer and kind of just like, whatever, they're under my roof, it's better than what I was doing. And that is actually a real problem. A lot of parents nowadays think that because their children are under their roof, it's better than when I was a kid and I was going to parties and drinking and doing all this stuff. But then you don't know what they're doing on their phone, whether it's like they're becoming autistic or they're like getting psyoped by TikTok into becoming trans. Like this is like a very real thing that's happening. And so it was so sad too, during like the Summer of Love in 2020, you see all these kids now exploiting like family dysfunction for clout. Like my dad won't say that George Floyd's life matters. And dad's like, how did my daughter turn out this way? And it's like, because you weren't more involved, which, you know, honestly, I would even sympathize with the idea that like
how does this connect to like, do you notice that he just dropped like 3 Republican talking points like real quickly and then tried to kind of gloss over it as if those won't get addressed? It'll be interesting to see if they do. The other thing is, can we just make the word psyop like illegal online? I feel like anytime somebody says psyop, you're inevitably going down conspiracy lane, you know? And keep in mind, this guy started his conversation talking about estrogen being laced in the water supply. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's hard to even know where to proceed with that kind of absurdity. You know, like when you're starting with a premise where it's like it's a psychological operation. Like how did this become like? It almost, and the way the guy just casually said psyop, it just sounds like something that he's using in his vocabulary like on a daily basis. Like how many psyops are out there? Like is just the whole world a psyop? Like I don't understand why this has become. I think Tim Pool used that word too on the last time I watched it. It's like, is this a normal term on the right? Like psyop? Is psyop like Cyclops of the X-Men? Is this like a new X-Men character that I'm unfamiliar with, or am I just like really old and out of touch? It just seems like a very strange thing to be like a common word. You know, the fact that it's been brought up so casually in like 2 of these episodes makes me wonder, like, is this like the new vocabulary of the right? Is like words like psyop? Like, didn't that used to be kind of like a fringe thing, like a conspiracy theorist thing? Anyhow, let's continue.
Influx and proliferation of technology happened so rapidly, it's almost unfair to expect the average American male to have been able to adapt to that to save his child. But I do think there is something to be said about, okay, now that we have that, as we go into Gen Alpha, you really need to be careful with how much time your kids are spending online. The same way that now, like, my generation sort of has like a micro generation. You have like first wave Zoomers, maybe like pre 9/11. And post 9/11, with how developed we are socially, you can see like with the advent of the iPhone and smartphones, there really is a cutoff. Like, I don't feel like I can relate to kids 5 years younger than me the same way that like millennials are like, oh yeah.
It's so bizarre that this guy's talking about relating to kids, and I'm having trouble relating to a kid who's literally saying that like back in the day, people used to get in brutal knockdown, drag out fights over broken Legos on their like during lunch times at schools. Like he's like, man, you know, men just aren't able to be men. They aren't able to fight in thunderdomes and, you know, get in their octagon to fight MMA to figure out like their manly worth or something. It's like the most bizarre take on reality that I've ever heard, but let's continue. Yeah, Paul said, you haven't been to the Secretary of PsyOps office? Paul also said, I think these giant generalities are sort of useless. You don't know what's going on in each individual's life. I like to spend my energy learning about people than pretending to already know. I totally agree. Yeah, and honestly, you know, this might be an age thing, but just the bizarreness of hearing somebody in their like early 20s, from what it seems like, kind of waxing intellectual about like, this is what, you know, this is how you raise young men. And it's like, but you're a young man. Like, what are you talking about? Anyhow, let's continue this bizarre wacko world that we've embarked upon. We embarked upon it yesterday. I have to finish it up. Yeah. The glimpse.
We're
How
all
old are you?
millennials.
How old are
23.
Zoomers now?
Shoot, anywhere between like, what is it, 97 and 2005.
Wait,
or
how old are
something?
you?
He's
23?
like, in all of my 23 years.
That good or bad?
I'm 34. Okay, I just didn't realize that.
But I think you're going to see with like the generations to follow, you're going to see that same sort of dividing line, but it's not going to be age because technology's here. It's going to be between the parents who didn't care, gave their kids iPads, and parents who were like, wait a minute, we have to go the completely opposite direction and actively monitor their child's access to technology.
One thing that we've been talking about a little bit on Timcast IRL is that porn on social media would be, it's a public space where anyone has access to. Children can get on these places. The idea that people would make porn available in a public setting would be unthinkable 20 or so years ago. But for some reason, because it's the internet, we completely ignore the fact that we've made all of this accessible to children. A kid goes to we had a video rental store when I was a kid, and they had a purple curtain and it said adult section, and you could not go in there. They would not let you. You had to show an ID and then they'd let you in. And that's where all the naughty bits were. Today, a kid can just pull up their phone, go on Twitter, and there's porn everywhere. And it's like, nobody cares. This is obviously going to be having, and it's not just about porn. It's about literally any kind of obscene, graphic, gore, shock content that children could not see before they were protected from. It seems like it's not just that these social spaces exist on social media where someone can get socialized in a very strange way or exploited by evil people, but it's also just even well-intentioned posting of news, right? Someone who's covering a big story and says, this is a shocking video, and it's like maybe a building exploding or something.
Hunter Biden's cock again, yeah.
Absolutely, but for real. I mean, we're talking about major politics of the Hunter Biden laptop story, and a kid absolutely will, at 13, if they have access to the internet, and many do, they're going to see Hunter Biden in the buff. Someone's going to send it to them. Some kid in their school is going to be like, haha, look at this. I'm sending you Hunter Biden or whatever graphic images.
Wait, someone, or like, doesn't Tim Pool like exclusively cover that whole controversy? Like it, anyhow, good on Destiny for kind of pointing out the hypocrisy.
Didn't happen before the internet. I'm curious. To a certain degree, you have point, the ubiquity of it.
I am wholly unconvinced by these arguments. I agree that like porn for kids or whatever should probably be reduced as much as we can, but like complaining about obscenity in media, I feel like that's been a trend for, honestly, probably since fucking Greek and Roman times. Complaining, yeah. I know they did a lot for Shakespeare. They complained about obscenity. I know they did a lot for Elvis Presley. They did a lot for rap music.
They apparently
did a lot for
Art Spiegelman.
You know, when kids would jerk off to girly mags or the Target mag, or you'd watch Showtime at 5 a.m. to see the titty come through, whatever. Yeah, on the Blur when the stars would align. I think that there's something to be said that this is probably not a good thing, but I think that the more important thing that I would go back to focus on is I think that the lack of socialization is the destructive aspect. I think that because people will say, for instance, like, oh, kids spend so much time. Wait, you're my age, right?
I'm 37.
Okay. Did you ever have a moment? I swear to God, every like millennial had this moment. If you were into games, you have a moment where your parents go to you and they say, listen, you're playing way too many computer games, way too many video games. It's not healthy. Can you like get off and like watch some TV?
Never happened to me.
You never had that happen to you before? No. Okay. I know that I think, was it the average American family's TV consumption? It was like 4 to 6 hours a night. It was an insane amount of TV consumption.
Yeah.
And people will point to the internet and go like, oh, the internet is killing people. It's poisoning your minds because people are sitting in front of screens so much. We sat in front of screens a lot in the 80s, 90s too, right? People would sit in front of the screens forever. I think, again, I would like to refocus, or in my opinion, the dramatic change.
he's pointing out like a really good thing, which is like it's kind of like weird to sort of freak out like and do the whole satanic panic kind of nonsense in a weird way about like everything, any kind of new technology. It's like it's the new technology that's destroying our children, and it's like these have been concerns for years, you know, and it's nothing new. It's nothing new. That the you know the advent of these things, and also it kind of verges on the territory of like you know over censorship, which is just such a bizarre place to be back to. You know, I felt like we kind of went that route like back in the 80s. I feel like we did. And it's kind of bizarre that we're suddenly going back to that route again. You know, it feels like there's like a rebirth of, you know, people panicking and freaking out and thinking, you know, the devil is in, you know, is on the internet now. And like, it, I don't know, it doesn't feel like exciting or new. It feels like a recycling of like weird 1980s, like your kid's brain is going to be rotted by television kind of stuff. It doesn't seem like a new argument, you know. Paul said, I would have saved a bunch of convenience and frustration if I would have had internet access at the age of 12. That's true. I would probably have not perused as many Sears catalogs as I did as a kid.
Change has been that even though you can engage with all those screen formed, forms of entertainment or jerk off to whatever mags you could find in the basement or whatever, the big thing that's changed is now we've been able to socialize online. Whereas before, even if I was a hardcore gamer growing up, I fucking went to sleep when I got home from school, woke up at fucking 2 a.m. to play video games and shit. I would do shit like that. But even at that, if I want to see my friends, I had to hop a bike and go to my friend's house. There was just no substitute for it. I couldn't do that online as much. I think that was a really, really, really big deal that we don't do things in real life anymore.
I wonder if our objection to so much of the internet socialization, like we say, oh, this thing is shocking, is that it's fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, everybody watched the same shows. The Simpsons would come on, Seinfeld would come on. Everybody, Star Trek was the biggest show syndicated on 3 networks, and there were a handful of channels. Most people didn't have cable. So The Simpsons, Thursday at 6 or whatever, everybody's watching it. Everybody gets the references. Now we have the internet where there's a whole just massive fracturing of all these different subcultures, and someone is going to be socialized.
So let me pause here and just point out that actually it's bizarre that he's bringing up The Simpsons as like this example of something that connected everybody, and forgetting the fact that like the same thing they're kind of doing right now is something they did with The Simpsons back in the day. Like the right was absolutely freaked out about Bart Simpson. It's insane. Like there were so many news stories about just like what a bad influence like Bart Simpson was on the youth. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there used to be like teachers freaking out about it. There was an episode where Bart Simpson like cheated on a test or something, and they were like, this is going to rot and ruin all the children. Like it's bizarre that now he's like, well, everybody had this commonality, and that's probably why we're all freaking out. No, that's not. People have done this same song and dance for years, for like ever. And it's hilarious to me that he used The Simpsons as this unifying example. I mean, to an extent, he's correct in the sense that there were areas where things weren't as fragmented, so we all had very similar social cues. Like nowadays, if you talk to somebody about a TV show or something, it's likely you may never have seen it because there's like 50 different streaming platforms. I get that. But the idea that he's bringing up The Simpsons as an example of people not freaking out is hilarious to me. That show was almost canceled so many times. There were so many people. I believe even like back in the day, like Rush Limbaugh used to like go off about like the unhealthiness and the horror of The Simpsons. So yeah, anyhow, Paul was saying, I remember The Simpsons. Yeah, Chris remembers too. He said the Bart T-shirt, that said "Slacker and Proud" caused a controversy at the time. Yeah, I remember the school I went to banned Bart Simpson T-shirts. This idea that like, Anyhow, it's just a bad example, Tim. Bad example. I mean, he just unfortunately picked the wrong show that unified people. That used to be the thing the right wing used to flip out about. You know, it was like The Simpsons and Slayer and Megadeth and like metal, and Twisted Sister was gonna like, you know, bring people to the devil
into a certain worldview that many other people will think is strange, obnoxious, extreme, and many of them are. And I wonder if that's the issue. My point being, you know, when I talk about getting access to the internet and seeing weird things, it could be, and probably is, that people thought The Simpsons was obscene. How dare they show these certain things? Oh, definitely.
Ren and Stimpy, and like
and, you know, my mom had parental locks on the cable box when we finally got cable, so we couldn't watch Beavis and Butthead. And she would only make sure we could watch certain episodes because some of them were really bad. So I had parents who did that. That being said, it's a lot harder to control what your kids are seeing because of the ease of access to the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of these 2-years are more sophisticated with their iPads than the fucking parents are.
Yep.
That's why too. Yeah, sorry.
The you know, the category of obscenity I think is true, and you can find like this throughout history.
Well,
but I think that like parents being offended by The Simpsons or like a Slayer album is definitely different than, you know, like the hardcore pornography that any person with an iPhone or any internet access can just access like immediately. I think that has done something to the human brain, the male brain in particular, especially when they're young and your brain is like in its most plastic form. I mean, we know that it reduces gray matter. We know it affects the way that like neural pathways are formed, especially in regards to like your socialization, your attraction. It can literally like warp your sexuality in general, which is why you see a lot of people who, you know, they get addicted to certain types of pornography and then all of a sudden they want to wave different kinds of flags. And it's like, okay, I think we kind of know.
They get ED.
Come on.
Yeah, no, that's real. There's been like 1,000% increase in the last 15 years because of things like pornography. And so I think even if you would have showed like, you know, the parents in say 1989 or whenever The Simpsons came out, like, hey, Homer Simpson, he's crude. But 30 years from now, your child is.
I hate the fact that this guy kind of gish gallops his point. So like he'll say something like really controversial and like very far right, and then he'll be like, but anyhow, and then he'll try to kind of like pacify it by making a like more kind of normal point and just kind of get away with like a cheap pot shot. And I just, again, I'm not a fan of this John Doyle guy. He's just rhetorically very slippery and kind of like insane, but also like pretty bad faith. Like where it's like you say things like, you know, where it's like, yeah, there's this, and then the gays, and then this, and it's like, wait, what? And it's like, no, I was just making a point about like too much porn or something. It's like, okay, but that's a different. Anyhow, let's go ahead. Yeah, Paul said Bill Cosby used to unify people.
It's going to have this device and it's going to be able to do this. They'd be like, okay, I'll take The Simpsons. That's fine. Like they definitely would have understood the degrees and probably would have been more willing to draw like a practical line. And like you said, too, I mean, any child can access this. And so a lot of parents, like when I speak about this issue on my channel, they'll be like, oh, well, you know, it doesn't matter. Just be a good parent. And it's like, it's not enough to just be a good parent. I mean, if your child has internet access and they're 13 years old, they're going to find it just because that's like the nature of the child. So you have to be more proactive as a parent to shield them because it's everywhere. It's on social media. And if not even explicitly on social media, it's like a thirst trap. It's like some TikTok girl who's going to try to like, you know, psyop your kid into like, oh, where's this video from? Then he looks it up anyways.
Well, you guys, new drinking game. Anytime he says psyop, just, you know, whatever you're drinking, whether, you know, it's kind of the morning. So let's just say coffee, you know, like have a shot of coffee every time he says psyop. You'll be so wired on caffeine by the end of this thing.
Last night we were talking about the whole pornography online thing, and I was reading the comments, and a lot of them were like, oh, Tim, you're all about personal responsibility, but you want other people to raise your kids. It's not really about that. I mean, we're talking about how all of these different subcultures that have kind of become radicalized because they've been segregated. Yeah, it's bad for children and the way they're socialized, but it's also not good for adults. So I think more broadly, the reason why thirst traps aren't good is not just because a kid could be on there, but I think it's also not good even if you're an adult. If you're a single man, I don't think it's a healthy way to be interacting with women solely. Like, if you're not seeing them on your day-to-day and actually forming relationships, interpersonal ones, platonic ones with women, and your only exposure to women is through a sexualized lens, I don't think that's healthy.
I think that's super true. If you interact with enough of a certain type of person, I think it
yeah, Paul was saying I'm hammered with this drinking game already. Okay, you guys, I have to step away for like 2 seconds again. We're going to play another trailer, and then we will continue our commentary on this, and we will continue on the pathway to finishing up the flat colors for this page. And honestly, it's looking like it'll probably be like another 20 minutes maybe. So let's go ahead and watch a trailer. I'm excited. I know that Jim Luhana is supposedly making us a new intro for my live stream where it's going to say, let's get ready to crumble at the beginning. And I'm very excited. He said there's going to be like an audience and a crowd and everything. I'm very excited about it. That being said, we're going to go ahead and let's just play the Jacob's Apartment trailer one more time. And hey, if you're watching the stream and it's entertaining you, please take the time to hit the like button. Make sure you've subscribed and you've hit that bell so you get notifications where we're about to go live. We're going to have some interesting content where I might be doing some live paintings as well, and all sorts of really interesting stuff coming up. So make sure you're subscribed and you're not missing out on that. And then do me a solid and hit that like. And here is the trailer for Jacob's Apartment, and then we'll continue our commentary. Clearly it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. Paul Pate said, your patience for these douchebags is too great for me. My kids are awesome, and it actually has very little to do with my parenting. I would agree with that. My son is amazing, and that's, regardless of, my little foibles as a parent. But let's continue and hear a 23-year-old talk about parenting, who I guarantee you probably doesn't have a kid. Let's continue.
Immunizes you against a lot of like the negative or more precarious stereotypes you might see. So if you interact with black people, you're not going to come away listening to a rap song like every black person is a criminal. Or if you interact with women in real life, you're not going to come away thinking like every woman wants to have her face slapped while she's getting bukkakied by 20, BBCs or whatever, right?
That was very
having the actual like real life interactions,
right?
I can serve as a good countering effect of things you see online. Yeah,
I thought you were going to say something like, if you interact with women, you realize they're not all gold diggers or something. But your analogy works too.
Thanks. Well, we're talking about relationships and porn, so
it's true. I have good news and bad news for the conservatives. First, the good news. The good news is OnlyFans cannot survive. OnlyFans inevitably will cease to exist as this hub for women.
I hate to say, but it seems so prudish and weird. Like, Gary Hodges was on yesterday, and we were talking about just like the obsession in the US and like the absolute horror and fear that people have relating to like any topic that mentions sex or nudity. And yet at the same time, like when you have, like insanely violent things, it's like, oh, okay, we don't even bat an eye at that. Like, it's like, okay, we definitely show a lot of violence, but anything slightly, exploring like something that's honestly healthier for people to be doing than killing each other or fighting over Legos. And it's just a really bizarre, very American thing. And it's so strange to me to see, I don't know what happened. Like, it's bizarre to me. Like, this guy, Tim Pool is supposed, I don't know. He showed up with his skateboard and was like, hey kids, how are you doing? I'm one of you. It's like, how did you become such a prude? Like, I don't get it. And I'm not like a guy who's like really open and wild, but it's just such a strange universe these people live in, where it's like, I think their idea of like parenting is like you're going to put your kid in like a balloon, and that's the way you want to kind of raise them, or something, like in a hamster wheel or something. I don't understand. It's just bizarre to me. Again, did we learn anything from the 80s? Anyhow, yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, yeah, anyhow, let's continue.
Women to post images of themselves in exchange for money. The bad news is the reason why. It's going to be other dudes using AI to make graphic images to sell to other guys. And that's going to shove women out of the pornography market, because it's already starting to happen.
But as a woman, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around something like AI pornography. Wouldn't part of the appeal of pornography be that it is a real person?
I think even too, it's like with OnlyFans in particular, like a lot of boomers who don't get it. Not that I get it, but they're like, why don't you just go watch like, regular porn? It's like the parasocial aspect, like guys like, talking to her. And this probably will be another guy too. Maybe it'll literally be like an AI model, and then some Indian guy's going to be like, oh, how was your day?
Sorry, him saying "not that I get it" was like a big red flag to me. You totally get it. Like, nobody qualifies like that. Yeah, I'm sorry. That guy qualifying it's like he just literally gave up the ghost there. You just gave it away, man. Not that I get it. Anyhow, let's continue.
Doing the talking. They like, feeling like I'm supporting this girl. I'm talking to her.
This is what's already happening, and it's crazy. People are using AI to generate women and to create Instagram profiles where they automatically upload AI generated images, and dudes are buying into it.
Fuck. There was a girl that I was talking to for like 2 or 3 days on Instagram, and I talked to a few people, and I ended up clicking through her profile because I was curious. When I started looking at pictures close, and I realized, wait a second,
they got you.
This is a fucking AI generated. I absolutely could tell. I was like, fuck. So yeah, that is absolutely happening.
And you mentioned, isn't part of the appeal that it's a real person? Not if you are someone who is hyper online playing World of Warcraft all day, and you're into like elves and furries or something. You're going to want to watch. You're going to have some weird fetish for things that don't exist in the real world. This is why erectile dysfunction is on the rise, because dudes are getting hyper. What, I don't even know what the right word is.
Desensitized.
Yeah, like and they're watching weird things and developing weird paraphilias or fetishes to where, like, look, there's Simpsons porn. It's like Rule 34. Like, if it exists, there is porn of it. So guys aren't attracted to regular women. They want the AI generated.
I feel like that was a tell too, because I've noticed that Tim Pool keeps mentioning The Simpsons. He mentioned The Simpsons like multiple times, and now he's talking about, there's Simpson stuffs out there if you look for it. Tim, do you have something to tell us about The Simpsons? Okay, let's continue.
Weird stuff.
I think that's still a niche in terms, because the vast majority of porn is still like real people, but hentai and 3D porn and shit does exist. I think there is an aspect where you want a real person, but I think that real person is actually a stand-in for something that looks convincingly real. We just haven't gotten that in our minds yet. Here's like a prediction that I make, and I made this prediction that when I looked and I saw that parts of this already come true. The idea of having like an AI girlfriend. Have you ever seen the movie Her?
Yes, great movie.
Okay, the idea of having an AI girlfriend on his face seems absurd, and even when you think about it a little bit more, it seems even more absurd. But I genuinely feel that if you could flip a switch to where these conversations got good enough, I actually think there would be like a huge cascading effect where people are like, this is actually, I want this. There's a program called, I don't want to shout it out, I guess, because now I'm worried about people finding it out. But I did some searching. I found one where you can have like AI girlfriends and stuff, and watching these forums, whenever they do like a software update and people are like, my person's not talking to me the same anymore. This is the saddest of my life. Or like my wife died and now like my person doesn't even treat me the same because of this like patch. Is there a way that I can roll them back? It's like hyper obsessive stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like insane. Yeah.
There's a movie I was talking about last night called Simulant, and it's got Sima. We talked about Simu Liu. Is that pronounced name? It's about.
So this is me kind of calling out something that I thought was like a kind of, maybe I'm crazy here, but I thought this was like a shared value. But this is where I guess I'm an old school liberal in the sense of like, who cares? I mean, I feel like there used to be like this kind of idea of like, who cares what somebody does like behind the doors of their own house as long as it's not hurting someone. Like this, I don't know if this is like an old idea, but it's like such a weird, bizarre obsession with like what individuals are doing in the privacy of their own homes. It's very strange to me. It's hard to relate or understand this like psychotic obsession with like what other people are doing in, you know, with their own privacy. Like is that a thing that's old now, where like people could like literally just kind of, as long as they're not harming other people in the privacy of their own homes, doing whatever they're going to do. You know, if that means like weird AI stuff, I don't care, you know? Maybe I'm crazy here. I don't know. Maybe I've aged out of the thing, or maybe I've just gotten to the age where this just seems really circular. Like it seems like something I've seen before, you know, in the 1980s. You know, a lot of people don't even remember this, but like in the 80s, they had like congressional hearings about rock and roll. You know, it was like, I remember it even being something that the left was demonized for, because Tipper Gore was like on the board that was like talking about bands having secret satanic messages in their music. And this was actually in Congress. Like, I believe, I don't think it was the Senate. I can't remember if it was Congress or the Senate, but I think it was a congressional hearing where they're grilling like metal bands about like, when we play this at like 4 times speed and like it says these evil messages, and it's like it's such a bizarre obsession. Like, who cares what music people are listening to? Who cares what, like, you know, media people are consuming, as long as it's in the privacy of their own home and nobody's getting harmed, right? I mean, oh my gosh. Chris Caligu is saying it exists versus it will take over are different. 100%. Okay, let's continue.
About there are AI robots of people. This man and this woman, spoiler alert, I guess, if you want to see the movie, I don't know, spoiler. They get robot versions of themselves made in the event one of them dies, and they download their memories into it. Guy dies in a car accident. She activates the robot, gets super creeped out by it because it's not him and it's like a facsimile, and she has absolute authority over it. So it's just completely different social dynamic. But I actually feel that there is a strong possibility for that in robotics. At least the mind of the AI is being formed. The body further behind. You know, you have blow up dolls, you have real girls or whatever they're called, the real dolls or whatever they're called, and you have robotics being developed. I think that's further behind, where chatbots and language stuff is a lot easier for us to do than to build a full functioning robot that can be a wife or a husband or something. But I feel like, given the opportunity, people are going to choose that. They're going to choose the perfect, ideal, be whatever you want.
Which is not a good thing, because in a healthy relationship, you're going to have someone who actually cares about you, genuinely cares about you. They're going to call you out when you're going down the wrong path, when you're doing something that's bad for you. That's someone who actually loves you. But if you're only forming relationships with AI girlfriend chap,
you know, I hate to say this though, but what about like a 90-year-old or something, you know, who's like lonely and like has no options in life? Like, is it really going to be that harmful for like an old 90-year-old to like have a little bit of company, even if it's AI? Like, it's that kind of like myopic thinking again of like 23-year-olds where they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of society. And it's like, have you ever thought there might actually be a positive application for this exact thing that you're creating like spooky like stories about? It's just a thing that's interesting, you know? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wild one. We are not going to finish the commentary this time on this because I have finished my flat colors for the page. And if you're wondering, why did I pick that weird shade of pink for the background in the room? It's because the room itself actually was that shade of pink. So I'm doing historical fiction. It's supposed to take place at Casa Gaidi. That is the color of the walls in their bedroom in Casa Gaidi from every bit of research that I could find. So I'm stuck with this kind of ugly shell pink. Paul said, this is so insane. It really was. It was a wild ride, guys. It did get spicy. Did I not give you spice in return? Just hit that like button. Hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Right now, I'm going to basically go to getting my my stuff going for my resume. I'm going to go ahead and like redesign that and update it. I'm going to be probably like updating my CV as well. And then after that, I am hoping to do one more comic page. After that, I'm going to hopefully do a painting on stream of a Haunted Mansion style portrait that I think would be really fun. I'm going to have to kind of rearrange my setup a little bit so that I can show while painting, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be in acrylics and stuff like that. The next stream, I'll probably, if you guys are enjoying this, let me know in the comments section too. If you're watching this after the fact, if you enjoyed this commentary on this very bizarre discussion on Tim Pool's show, let me know. It has been really educational for me. I wasn't aware that apparently they're putting estrogen in water, that kids used to fight to the death on playgrounds over Legos being broken, and that men no longer roam the wilds getting in fistfights to protect their women on a daily minute-by-minute basis. And what was the other thing that he claimed? This fellow. Yeah, there's a lot I've really learned about at least some people on the right and their kind of opinions, at least by John Doyle. That's his name. John Doyle also, what was the other thing? There were so many things that it's almost hard to keep track. Oh yeah, he also thought that PTSD was caused by people being just so happy with the heroism that they're able to exercise at war, that when they come back to a mundane life where they aren't allowed to be heroes or have valor, that's why people have PTSD. This is all stuff that John Doyle said in this conversation. It's been very educational, if not also absurd and hilarious to kind of watch. And I will say, Tim Pool has proven himself to be a little bit more of a moderator on this one, but also he is kind of lining the deck because he has two people on the right and one person on the left as a guest, as well as himself, who, whether he calls himself a moderator or not, he's definitely right leaning. So he has three people versus one on a discussion / debate, whereas before, on the last one that we watched with Emma Vigland, it was only two people on the right versus one, and he said at the end that it was a little unfair because the deck was stacked a little bit against the guests. Interesting that he's increased the right versus left dynamic rather than imbalance, rather than decreasing it after saying that on the Emma Vigland discussion. So it's been interesting. It's been educational. And it's been hilarious. And I will see you guys on the next one. Chris said flats are half the battle. So we got our flats done. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether this was fun or not, to listen to, we all got work done. And hopefully it kept you entertained while you were working on your work. I will see you guys on the next live stream. Thanks to everybody who is in my community. I do want to make some Kremlin merch. I think that would be really fun. I don't know if you guys would want to support or sport some Kremlin merch, but it might be kind of hilarious. A couple inside jokes. Maybe we'll have a Victorian man on a jet ski as a deep cut as a t-shirt. So let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in. And I will see you guys on the next live stream. Again, I really appreciate you guys. And this was a spicy one. The next one, I think the painting stream will be more of a just kind of painting and talking about what I'm doing whilst painting. But we definitely are probably going to have another few potential spicy streams coming up because it's fun to do the spicy stuff whilst I like the spice while I'm working on comics. So I'll see you guys on the next one. And yeah, appreciate you guys. And please whatever you do, be cautious with the water that you're drinking. All right. Have a good night, guys. Bye. Or a day, I guess. Bye. And that end took forever. Okay, here we go. Goodbye.